Shitter's full. I watched that movie probably 40,000 times.
We actually watched it
holiday
while
season.
wrapping presents on like the 23rd, I guess, 24th maybe.
Yeah, I watched it Christmas morning.
Can't go wrong.
All right.
We had to watch the televised edited version, which is a little upsetting, but what are you gonna do?
All right, everybody mute. Let's go.
Welcome to Bloody Good Horror, covering the best and worst of the horror genre since Halloween 2007. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the final episode of Bloody Good Horror for 2017. My name is Eric, and I'll be your host for this evening, where we will be counting down the top 10 best and the bottom 3 worst horror movies of the past year, plus a bunch of other amazing mathematical magic from one Mr. John Schnars. That's right, it is the Bloody Good Horror Year-Ender. Everybody, welcome to the show.
Yay!
Yay!
Hello.
First up tonight,
and
joining me, her first ever year-ender episode. I can see her excitement on her face.
Yes.
Please welcome High Priestess of Books at Bloody Good Horror to the show, Cece.
Hello, I am super stoked and very honored to be here, so thank you.
It's her first and it might be her last because she just told us that she's drinking bad wine.
No, I stopped drinking it.
Don't disappoint me, okay, Cece?
Whew.
No pressure. Next up on the show, the beer guy at bloodygoodhorror.com. He drinks beer. His name is Joe.
That's what I do, and that is my name.
He also watches The Real Housewives.
A lot.
We had an in-depth discussion on Slack yesterday about a woman's turn to go urinate on Floribama Shore.
Oh,
We-
she gives me life.
We couldn't figure out why she took all her clothes off. And
Because she was
then
wearing a romper,
a romper.
wasn't she?
Yeah, see,
Well,
I
Cece,
wouldn't.
where the fuck were you during this conversation?
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought of that, but my wife said, "Oh, she must be wearing a romper," and I said, "There you go." Next,
I'll have you know that because of that show, or the show that we were talking about, Floribama Shore, we literally watched like the entire season thus far, and
It's-
Kyle was super pissed. So thought I
Pissed
should
about- Pissed about the romper or pissed about what?
that I made him watch that show.
Oh,
Next
All I
up,
know is I'm
His
so
romper 'cause he
disappointed
didn't know
in you
what to do.
guys. I almost downloaded Floribama Shore to watch.
well, that's pretty great.
there's
It's
only
worth
like
it.
5 episodes.
Yeah, there's not very many.
Next up on the show, he was last to show up tonight, but he's first in my heart. He is the web manager at bloodygoodhorror.com. Please welcome Mark.
Still number one, son.
There you go. You and Schnars are
Say,
tied.
John didn't show up.
Next up, coming to you from Indiana, please welcome Casey to the show.
Hello!
And finally, the man of the hour.
Every hour, I like to think of it.
Some people say Sebastian Stan looks like him. I'm just gonna put that out there. I don't know. Who's having his own little moment in the sun now, John, with that mustache of his? But it's a topic for another show, I guess. Topic for an Eric show is what that is.
or no show.
Tonight,
Settle down, Eric.
Tonight, John, you have been working away in the nerdery with your calculator to come up with math and stuff for tonight's show.
mhm.
How are you feeling?
Feeling great. I think when I think Bloody Good Horror, I think math, I think numbers. So, yeah, today's the day.
I want you to know, too, in case you were worried, that I forgive you for dressing me down on Slack today for not using a proper wine glass.
Come on.
It was
It's all
not
good
it
fun.
was not the literal dressing down Eric was hoping for at John Jim.
He literally called me a barbarian on Slack today. It's okay. No big
Well,
deal.
I said, if you, I think it was something along like, you're drinking like a barbarian. I didn't say you are a barbarian. That's just going too far.
It's a Game of Thrones thing, John. I've just been doing a lot of barbarian things lately.
That's
Mm.
fair.
You know?
Drinking out of an elk horn.
Yeah, exactly. A horn of ale. All right, John.
What about Casey?
2017. We're excited. I already interrupted Casey, Mark. Were you not paying attention?
Me?
No, I'm not.
So, couple.
Favorite after school
We're gonna
special.
jump
What
right
about
into it here
Casey?
tonight, but we have first thing we just want to say, welcome anybody who doesn't normally watch the video stream. We sent this out to the wide wide world. If you like what you're seeing, this is something you can get as part of being a patron. So check us out, bloodygoodhorror.com. Nope, patreon.com/bloodygoodhorror.
I mean, you can also go to bloodygoodheart.com and probably figure it out from there. But
Speaking of
either way.
Patreon, another bonus coming up Sunday, January 7th. The new class is going to be watching and live streaming You're Next, which is basically, if you ever saw an old school Bloody Good Horror Spooktacular, it's that, but with younger people. So people like younger people better, I think, right?
great movie too.
They're just better than we are.
And if you haven't seen an old school spooktacular, just imagine watching along with the movie and live tweeting and engaging in general debauchery, and that's what it is.
And actually, they're all on YouTube, so you can check them out.
There you go.
Subscribe to our YouTube,
Yikes.
BGH video. I was watching that Hellraiser remix today, guys. It's pretty fucking dope.
Those spooktaculars are a real mess. Just warning for anyone who's thinking about getting into it. So.
Yes, they are.
My favorite is there was always like a group of people that would get together and send us a picture of their drunken mess, like
was
watching us, and it's
Yes,
like, oh
that's
man,
my
that's
favorite.
great.
Yeah.
That's great.
I just remember like I shouldn't say I remember, but one of the last two we did, I don't remember finishing, and I remember playing with the knife, and that was it.
There was a malt liquor one that we did, or
Yes.
a like 40s.
I feel like that was the last one we did, and with good reason.
Yeah, I
when
literally,
we gave
I
up.
texted Mark the next morning and I asked him if there's meth in 40s because I have never felt that jacked up in my entire life.
We flew a little too close to the sun.
Like, I don't think I'd had a 40 since I was 15 years old.
Nor should you.
All right,
Pretty much made for
till you're, like,
teenagers and
65.
bums under bridges.
we got a lot. We got a lot to do tonight. Quick, CC, there's some book club news you want to share?
Yes, the 2018 reading list is now posted on our Goodreads page. So all of that, Christmas money or Amazon gift cards you got, you can definitely spend it buying some books for the new year.
Sweet.
You won't tell me how to spend my gift certificates.
I just did. Well, actually, you already spent your money. You spent it at Target.
We're buying a
Use your
swing
Abercrombie
set.
and Fitch gift cards, all right, Joe?
Are those stores still around? They must be, right?
I think
I'm
so.
pretty
I don't
sure.
know.
Sure.
I think they have a website. I don't know. We'll see.
All
On the
right,
internet.
Joe,
Yes, sir.
what are we drinking tonight?
Oh,
Beer guts.
2017, the year Joe finally got his bumper.
I know. Big time. 10 years we've been around,
Big
and
time.
finally it happened.
Big time.
Somebody, didn't they send in, like, whatever episode it was where we first talked about doing the intro
It was
music?
like episode 50 or something.
Yeah.
It was like your third episode.
But it was a big year for me, but not a big year for a lot of people. And we actually, backstory on this is this brewery that brews this beer actually contacted us a couple months back, and I've been a big fan of theirs for years, and I was super excited to hear that they've actually got a few folks that listen to the show. And I thought the pale ale that they put out would fit perfectly with just 2017 in general. So this is from the good folks at 21st Amendment Brewery out in San Francisco, California. And my beer pick for 2017 is their Bitter American. Wah, wah, wah.
Oh, Joe.
So this is a pale ale.
That's pretty good, actually. That one beer name perfectly summed up 2017 for me, John.
All right. Shut down the show. We're done. Let's hear your fucking word, John.
Damn it.
So anyway, Bitter American is a pale ale. So it's kind of a loose style. Like we talk about IPAs a lot. We talk about pale ales. This one has a decent amount of hops in it, but a little bit lower on the alcohol level. So it comes in at 4.4% ABV, which is like around the same as like your traditional lagers and things like that. So this is totally like you can bring a 6-pack to the kids' soccer game and you probably won't even get in trouble drinking it out in the open. But
Because they check the ABVs. That's
they
how
do. Well, they're like,
how they
this
nail
is
you.
borderline non-alcoholic, so we're just gonna give you a warning this time. Finish up what you got, and then don't do it again.
Okay.
It's fair.
But just because it's lower, this one actually still has a great sort of hop bitterness to it, but not like super overpowering. You could call it like a session beer if you wanted. But like we say, I've said a bunch of times, I love everything 21st Amendment puts out, and they distribute pretty far. We just got them here in the Chicago area a couple of years back. And I know they're all over the East Coast, so you really have no excuse not to pick them up. 21stamendment.com is their website. And yeah, there you go. Let's call it a day.
That's great, Joe. Thank you for that. That
Thanks,
is a
buddy.
beer recommendation, something you get every day and every year at Bloody Good Horror. Let's take a quick break.
It's usually a weekly thing, not a daily, but it's good.
Let's take a, you know what I mean. Let's take a quick break and jump right into the year ender.
This is it, Senator. Your big breaking TV. From the prime time, bitch. Main feature.
Oh, John Schnars.
Eric, you've been getting a little worked up.
I can't even describe my excitement because all I can think of to describe it are dirty words that I shouldn't say.
Oh, no.
So,
Turgidity.
turgid, yeah. Tumescent, maybe. I'm pretty excited.
Lunaring.
Wow.
John Schnars. Did
Dude, turgidity was the one today. How did you guess?
John, are you aware that you went to Duke?
You know, I had forgotten, but then you reminded me every week for the last 10 years. And
Then
I
something
remembered.
racist happens in the news, and you're like, oh, that's right, I went to Duke.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Words. You went to Duke. You bring us words. It's 2017, y'all. Please bring us the word of the day.
Wow, that was super half-hearted.
Seriously. Did you turn up the volume on that? Like,
I don't know. I was just
That
going
sounded
with
like
you
the
guys.
Price is Right said trombone.
Wait, was
So,
it too low?
It was a little low. It's
Whoa.
fine though, because I'm bringing the energy. So, oh,
there we go.
That's better.
I'm gonna need some more snare in my headphones.
Turn me up, yo. Turn me up. Turn me up, dog.
Today's word is augur.
Hmm.
That is AUGUR. It took me a little while to find this word because AUGER is also a word that has a different meaning. But augur, portend a good or bad outcome. It actually just means portend or to bode, I guess. Yeah, it comes from the Latin, which an augur in Latin is a diviner, one who divines things. But yeah, augur. I came up with this word because today I was writing up the top 10, Bloody Good Horror year-end post for the website, and I used this word. I don't know where it came from. It just kind of popped into my head, and here we are. So that's a little preview for those of you who are looking forward to reading my annual piece of writing that I do. It's the only thing I think I've written for the site.
It's the only reason I haven't jumped off a roof all year, John.
waiting to see what words I might put into the
Yeah.
post. Yeah, I hear you. That's fair.
And
All right,
the-
John Schnars.
Yes.
If.
As the kids say, get it.
All right. So, here's how this works for those who are new to the Bloody Good Horror year ender. The way we let everybody who contributes to Bloody Good Horror vote.
We
We
don't count all the
tabulate-
votes, though. We don't tell them that part. We only count certain people's votes. We
No,
just
so
let,
we had
let them vote.
16 voters. We had 16 voters this year. It was our highest ever. It tied our highest ever participation rate. We collect all those ballots. Basically, anything for something to qualify, it had to be released in the United States in the year 2017. And we use released meaning readily available to the average consumer in the United States. This isn't like you found it on friggin' BitTorrent website because it came out in Europe last year. This is
Hey,
Casey, that was not directed at you.
Or like if
Specifically-
you like are a writer for Horror Site who sent you to a film festival and you got to see a movie that nobody's going to be able to see for like 2 more years, that don't count, bro.
Correct. So this had to be a quote unquote wide release or a VOD release in the year 2017. Any movie that fits that description is eligible, and people can vote for anything they want, and they have to vote for their top 10 favorite, which we've been running on the website. If you are a visitor to bloodygoodhorror.com, you've seen some of those. And they also pick their bottom 3. we tabulate all of those ballots and we produce one final list, which is the definitive Bloody Good Horror list. I'll give you a couple of high-level stats. What we're going to do then is we're going to jump into the worst. We're going to run down the bottom three pretty quickly, and then we'll jump in some honorable mentions, and we'll just crank through the top 10.
Just like Collins, John always starts at the bottom.
Do it.
So, so just really quick, I mentioned we had the highest number of voters ever. We had 16 voters. Interestingly, we had about 31 movies. Well, we had 31 movies total receive a vote for a top 10. That's actually tied for the lowest number, right? So there was what was interesting this year is there was actually a high level of sort of agreement around a bunch of the movies. It was also the lowest number of films to receive a number one vote.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah.
Say again?
That makes sense.
Well, to give you an idea, in 2013, because I keep these stats, I went back and I looked through some of the old lists. In 2013, we had 11 different movies receive a number one selection. This year we had 3. So
Whoa.
a lot of agreement. There were also 8 movies that were on at least half of the ballots. So while there were 31 total named, 8 different movies were on at least 8 of the ballots. So it's a pretty interesting list. I think one of the things that's super interesting about this year compared to other years, if you go through numbers like 11 through 20, there are years where some of those movies would have been in people's top 5. And it ended up being a very, very deep year. We can talk about why. I think there's a lot of different reasons. But
I definitely felt that way looking and like picking through my list, like looking at things that didn't make it. There's a lot of decent stuff.
I mean, there were movies that are in like the 15, 16 range that had 4 or 5 people vote for them. But they just don't, if they weren't very high on people's lists, that typically means they're going to fall off.
I mean, I've had years where I had to put stuff I literally didn't like at number 10 because there were no other good movies that year.
I will say there were 3 movies that appeared on at least one top 10 and one bottom 3. Yeah.
I know one of them.
Yeah, you can probably, and one of them made the top 10, so we'll get to that pretty quick. But all right, let's jump in. The other thing we're gonna do here, I will give you the rundown, or I'll sort of name each movie, but I'm actually gonna kick it to a different member of the crew to kind of talk about the movie, or at least kick off the conversation. We'll kind of.
Can you kick it?
I can. I'm
Yes,
curious.
I can.
Can
If the rest of you will be able to.
Can you dig
John,
it?
you know what I can do with the mic in my hand.
John,
Eric,
Oh man.
go.
The number 3 worst film of 2017, The Bye Bye Man.
Yeah. All right.
Number 3. And Eric, I'm actually going to kick it to you because you had this as your worst film of the year.
I knew you would, buddy. I just knew. Some years I just know. The Bye Bye Man is fucking awful. It is so bad. Let me tell you how bad it is. Who here saw The Bye
How
Bye
bad
Man?
is it?
Yeah, so
Who here saw
I
it?
also had this as my worst movie of the year, and I was shocked that more people didn't have it. I
Because-
think people just didn't
because
see it.
People
I
didn't.
didn't see it.
I mean, this is
Yeah.
why.
I
This is
almost
why
put it
worst.
in my bottom list, even though I haven't.
This
seen
is why worst of the year has kind of become broken a little bit because we are now outnumbered by the other writers who don't go see all the trash we see. And so it's like, and they even say like, I have trouble with my bottom list because if you didn't have to see this garbage, why would you go see it?
Yeah.
But the only saving grace of Bye Bye Man is it was hilariously fun to talk about because it's so stupid. Like this weird Rob Zombie looking dude and his dog. Remember the demon dog?
Yeah.
And then there was like the coin flip that
I remember all of it.
they
Eric.
kept finding
Like it was yesterday.
coins for some reason. And like
There was that drawer that was like very impactful to the plot.
yeah,
Like the
it's like
coin fell out of
Somebody got
it. or
hit by a car.
I
remember this.
always say my criteria for this slot is like what movie was I the angriest after seeing this year, and this was like literally there was no one else even in the competition. Bye Bye Man took it away.
Yeah, so I should say that all 3 of the bottom or top worst, whatever the hell you call them, the bottom 3, all received 5 votes. And they were actually really tightly bunched. So it was a pretty close vote. Like any of these 3, you really could have put in there. I was pretty shocked because Flatliners was my number 2, and it did not make the bottom 3. It didn't make me
angry.
people just didn't see it. I think.
Probably 'cause
Yeah,
they
also
didn't. I know
people
I
didn't
didn't go
see
see
it.
that.
Well,
Um,
I
I
should
might-
say too, like these worst lists rarely have like straight to DVD or straight to streaming movies on them. It's usually like
Well,
really
because-
bad theatrical movies.
Well, and you get angrier too when you paid to go see a movie in the
Right.
theater and it's that bad. I will say, John, my only concern going into tonight is I was worried that Bye Bye Man would not make the bottom movies list, and I was gonna have to get mad. So I'm good from here on out.
it ended up being not that close. Like the top three in the worst there was a good gap between them and the rest. Number two, and I'm gonna kick this to Casey. Number two is
Uh-oh.
Rings.
Mm.
Oh,
Right.
Uh,
Cool.
so yes, Rings. I will have to admit, I was not the biggest fan of the original Ring movies, anyways. So I was already a
It
little
was
down
playing
in the
from
mouth.
behind.
Yeah, I was a little down in the mouth about it, anyways, going into it. But yeah, this movie was boring and it was highly forgettable, and it did not really add up to anything that I liked about the original film movies. It was just dull and a lot of bad performances, and ultimately its biggest fault is it was completely forgettable, because I had to think. I was surprised when I was working on my list to go back and figured out that I remember Johnny Galecki was in this.
Yo, he is by
Leonard from Big Bang
he was
Theory.
such a like the worst character of the year, maybe.
Oh, I know.
Wow.
Yikes.
Even worse than the Rob Zombie looking Bye Bye Man.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh no.
He didn't dig through any ditches or burn through any ways.
The hell, man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't see Rings.
I also agree with this one.
Oh,
It's
so
bad.
It's
Yeah,
it's
it was really
probably like the tweets that have gotten the most likes of mine have been
Rings
tweets
related.
about Donald Trump, yeah, and shitting
The
on
biggest
movie
the
Rings.
biggest sin of Rings is like you go into it thinking to bring this series back in 2017, you must have had a really brilliant idea of how to do it and make it relevant for modern audiences. And then you go watch it and you're like, oh god, no, they
Well,
totally
it's like
didn't even know
it's
what they
like
were doing.
when it's like you have a series and then you have like a bad sequel that kills the series, except it happened 10 years after the other movies came out.
Was
There
the
was
second
nothing-
was Rings 2 good? I never saw it.
I don't remember liking
I
it that
don't
much.
think so.
No.
The-
Yeah.
the
I think I saw it on
ring-a-ding?
video. Well, because wasn't what's her name in it? The Naomi Watts, who
Yeah,
was
I
in the
think-
American.
think
I,
so.
I believe so, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I
Once
thought it
the
was like
part one.
okay.
I don't ever
Are
want
we
to see.
gonna reopen the debate on if Naomi Watts is a good actress or not, John?
From Shut In.
She's
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 Shut In.
she's
from
delightful.
One of
You
last year's
shut your mouth,
worst
John.
films, actually. Yeah, Naomi Watts, whatever. She's fine. Okay, moving on. The worst film of the year, and again, this was somewhat of a surprise to me, but I'm gonna let Joe tell us his thoughts to start. Friend Request.
Really?
Yeah.
That got number one?
That's
Because
pretty-
I was kind of worried that because it was my worst. But I
had-
kind of assumed that not many people actually went and saw that too.
Wow, I
No,
gotta
it
say-
had five, or it had four people pick it as their worst.
I
which
gotta
was
say,
enough
too-
My
to put it-
worst.
Just-
Yeah, this is my
Yeah.
number two.
Just
just
my
the whole premise of this was ridiculous because like at the end of the day, and I wrote about it on my list as like a joke, but it really boils down to the fact that like you should never befriend like the sad girl in your school. It's like don't do anything nice because it's gonna come back to bite you in the ass and kill all your friends. So just avoid that.
Yeah.
And you're gonna
Yeah.
be fine.
her big heart
But
was
it
her
sucks
downfall.
because that movie, like, it had a cool, like,
No,
the whole concept of like black mirrors and like computers being black mirrors and
Okay,
it being,
the
you know,
black
like, it could have done something with it, and it was
There was a kernel there for sure.
the
But
black
but it
Black
was
Mirror
horrible.
thing was kind of cool. I will give you that.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what any of those things that you guys are talking about haven't done, but
You use a black mirror in like rituals with like witches and stuff.
wow.
So she
Uh,
was a witch, is what
I-
it boiled down
You know
to.
what, John? I'm feeling really good about this bottom
John
three.
uses mirrors from World Market in his rituals. So,
Not Pier 1, but
yeah,
World
or
Market.
maybe Pier 1.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess John's a little too fancy for World Market.
All right, Schnars.
All right.
Nice work.
So we are ready. Yeah, we are going to move into the best. I'm actually going to start. So I'm going to give you a bunch of honorable mentions. Again, we had a lot of films bunched up between say 11 and 20 that all got a bunch of votes, that were all solid films. In some ways, surprising they didn't make it. There was a bunch of films tied right at the bottom, right at the like number 12. So in this relative order, It Comes at Night, Gerald's Game, and The Void. all honorable mentions. Followed then right above them, Super Dark Times comes in at number 11. So
Oh, man.
all of these movies got at least four. Were on at least 4 ballots. Gerald's Game was as high as number 3 on Luke's ballot, and Sophie had Super Dark Times at number 2.
Wow.
So
I mean,
yeah,
I had The Void at it was number 10, so I guess it wasn't that high up on mine.
they snuck it in there. No,
It's
I mean
all-
they got
It's all
you know,
weighted, right? So, like, if somebody puts a number 1, that could equal a bunch of lower votes.
Yeah, and you'll see it when we get into the actual top 10. There's literally one film that kind of got a lot of pull at the top, but yeah, Super Dark Times and The Void both ended up on 6 different ballots. I think all of these. I mean, Gerald's Game is somewhat an outlier. It Comes at Night obviously was a theatrical release, but all of these got a lot of run in that sort of in the new distribution model, right? So
Yeah.
going direct to Amazon, direct to Netflix. Gerald's Game was obviously produced for Netflix. They're movies that, like, a lot of times people, like, I was thinking about The Void earlier today. Like, we would have all found this movie like 5 years after it came out if this was like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And we would have thought it was like the best movie that had ever been made,
I mean, I thought it was amazing. I loved
I
it,
liked it a
except
lot.
it was just like you didn't know what the hell was going on.
I thought
But,
that
like,
was the movie you were talking about that you said was in best and worst list because it was in Shelton's list, which we posted today. We should say too that our lists are not all published on the site, but by the time this is released as an episode, they probably should be, along with the full recap post. But Shelton had this in his bottom 3, which I thought was
Oh,
really
was it
interesting.
Shelton? I thought Craig did too, but I could be making that up. But yeah, I
Yeah,
remember
honestly,
posting that and being
I
surprised
thought The
that he
Void
hated
was a
it.
little like it's all right.
Wait.
It had some cool visuals.
I don't know. The
Yeah,
more
I
I
mean,
think
like-
about it, the more I think about it, the more I like it.
yeah, like I can see why people don't like it and why they would put it as their worst. But I mean, visually and there's some like underlying stuff that was really cool for me.
Yeah,
I liked it.
I agree.
I don't know.
I thought the practical effects were great in The Void.
Mhm.
It kind of really drove that film. Super Dark Times, obviously, we like just watched it for the show.
I think it just kind of crept in under the wire, and people aren't necessarily as aware of it.
Well, and I was looking it up. It actually got released back in January. So this movie's been around,
Oh,
and it's
wow.
like weird to me that it only hit our radar toward the end of the year. I guess because we were asking people to put this list together.
It's so good.
The one that was highest on my list of all these, and I wasn't on the show, so I just wanted to talk about it really quick, was It Comes at Night.
Yeah.
I hadn't watched it. I went back and watched it in preparation for doing my list. I love the movie. And it wasn't. I don't think it was on any of the rest of your guys' lists, or maybe if it was at the bottom. But
I was angry about the title because
Yeah.
the title and the marketing, because it builds you up for expecting something that the movie is
Yeah.
in no way about.
Yeah.
And
I-
so
I think I got 45 minutes into watching it because I was watching it for the year-end list,
Like,
and I just got super bored.
spoiler alert about It Comes at Night. There's no it and nothing comes at night. Unless you're
And
talking
nothing
about
even
I haven't
comes.
seen it yet.
unless you're talking about like a teenage boner, in which case I guess that makes sense.
I think Eric, I think you could argue there is an it in the movie. Like, there's things.
That's
like,
fine.
things happen.
But a lot of it was the trailers and the marketing. It's just
Depends
like
on what you mean by comes.
I
Yeah, I
seem
mean-
to remember that discussion being very colored by like, what the hell were they doing marketing this movie?
Yeah, I get it. I think if anything, my expectations were probably like really low because I had started to see people's lists come in, and especially for you guys, no one had listened. I'm like, wow, this actually must have been like not that great a movie. And I don't know, like I just found it really impactful, like the kind of like
Mhm.
family. Like I love the small sort of setting of it. I think, and we can talk about it, there's a lot of movies throughout the list that have these really small settings, right? They have
Right.
single
Yeah.
location, single family.
Yeah, I
set,
do
like,
think
few
there's a
people.
lot of great tension in that movie. I will say that.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's a good movie there, but like Eric hit the nail on the head. It's all about the marketing there and the title and everything else. You expect something more out of the way they marketed this. You expected more of a monster
I
movie
even-
and stuff, which is not what this is. It's more of a survivalist type.
I
movie.
even think putting that movie in
yeah.
theaters was a bad move. Like in a year
I-
Yeah.
where in
I
a year
haven't
where
seen it, but
movies
I'm assuming that I mean, I didn't want to see it because of the commercials for it.
like my audience was angry coming out of it. That's one thing I remember about that movie because it was a mainstream horror audience that was like, where was the like
They were all
spooky-
saying, "There's not even an it in this movie." Yeah, I don't know.
It's filmed in Alaska. There's no night.
Yeah,
It's just daytime the whole time.
No,
no, I
That's
I will say,
A
like
rom com that takes place during the day.
Joel Egerton or Edgerton, I don't know how I just love him. I'll watch any movie he's in.
Yeah.
I'm like tempted to go. Isn't he in this Bright movie with Will Smith?
Yes, he is.
Yes.
I feel like I have to
Oh.
watch it because I like him that much.
That
and
movie
I'm
looks
kind of like,
unwatchable.
well, obviously it does. But
Wait, I don't know. The number of people that have said it's really shitty is starting to make me feel like maybe I would really like it.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like, yeah, like Will Smith, like he makes garbage, but every time I end up loving it. Like if he's just being Will Smith, welcome me to Miami, I'm like, I'm on board.
Yeah, I think the problem might be the expectation that it was going to be good, and then it would
Yeah.
always be
Right.
disappointing.
Wild Wild West, that movie is terrific.
Oh my god.
Lies.
Yeah.
There is this Utah NEV.
John Schnars.
all right, we're gonna move this along.
Where's Wild Wild West on the
We're,
list?
we're starting at number 10. The movie is Creep 2.
Heyo.
Received
Yes.
eight votes. I'm going to give for everyone. I'll give you the number of votes. I'm going to give you the highest position that it achieved on someone's list. It was this. So Creep 2 was number 3 on Sophie's list, and our presenter will be Mark, who had it at number 5.
Nice. And I also used it for the featured image on the post on the website, bloodygoodhorror.com. I don't know. I thought that this movie, I may have given it a sort of, well, actually, maybe I didn't, I can't, it was one of my first episodes back. And I don't know. I think it was so different than the first one, but also just kind of, man, I'm really losing it here.
Say anything, Mark. Just say something
I think
about the movie.
that he's sort of invented his own genre, right? And I the way that I phrased it in my list was the bathing in front of people and then trying to kill them genre, because that's basically what both of the movies are about. But I think that they're both just like genuinely creepy. I'm trying to find a way to not say creepy, and are just really great. So I think that he also benefits from like having a platform like Netflix where you can just throw a movie like this up and not have to worry about how well it does.
Totally.
And yeah, I mean, it to me, the first one really, I always mentioned like the ending of the first one sticks with me forever. And maybe the second one didn't necessarily have that like absolute standout moment, except for maybe the hanging, which was pretty fucked up. But
I
don't
thought you
know.
were just gonna say when he like got naked and stood in front of the camera.
you know what's
Like,
weird? For some
Oh, that's
reason, that
right.
didn't
This
even-
was the
it's just-
year I did see Mark Duplass's wiener this year. I forgot about that.
Yeah, right. And
Like a
but
lot
that's
of it.
the thing is, if you've seen the first one, for some reason, him just getting butt ass naked and standing there doesn't seem that weird.
No, I mean, there's nothing Mark Duplass could do at this point that I would be like, this guy, like he's just He's
Except for that
operating
movie
on a
where you're
different
like
level.
injecting stuff into dogs. What was that movie?
Oh, yes,
Oh,
that
yeah,
movie.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
The Lazarus Effect.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
that was the exception that proves the rule. I
Nice
guess.
pull,
but,
Schnars.
But overall, I think that like just creatively, he's awesome, and it's just such a cool. This was a year of a lot of like really unique films, and even though this is a sequel, it still felt super unique to me. So
Yeah, so I will say no, I was gonna say it's the only sequel. That's not 100% true. But otherwise, a lot of original titles. Let's keep it moving. We'll go to number 9. This is probably going to be one of the more controversial ones on the list. Number 9 is The Shape of Water.
Okay.
It was only on 4 lists because, as was
only
well
4 people saw
documented,
it.
as was well documented on this show.
I don't think it's controversial. Like, I'm glad it made the list. I couldn't see it.
Mhm.
It kind of is what it is, but it seems like something that I would be into.
Well, so
I'm
here's
just
the
glad
thing.
that there is 4 people that lived within 30 miles of seeing them.
All right. So here's the thing. It's on 4 lists. It was number 1 on 3 of those lists, which is
Oh,
how
wow.
it made it into the top 10. So Craig and Chris and Jason all had it at number 1. I will talk about it because I actually did just see it.
Mhm.
I ended up not putting it on my list after seeing it, and I will say I
Wait a
didn't put it on my list because I don't know that I can credibly say that I considered it one of the best horror movies of the year.
John
No, I
Schnars,
agree with-
after all that, it's not even on your list.
Jeez.
No. Well,
I'm-
no, and like, this is why it's worth seeing and like having
I-
the conversation.
Technically, it's a 2019 release too, John, so it wouldn't qualify.
I mean, listen,
I agree with you, John, though, because I just saw it recently too. And I thought it was really great, maybe a little too dreamy, but I didn't think that it should really be in the like horror category at all, which is why I didn't put it on my list.
But like,
I
listen,
mean-
if that's the case, then number 9 is kind of the perfect place for it because it's not
Yeah.
taking up a slot really high up and it's
Yeah.
being represented.
It's definitely worth seeing, but there's just a lot of other, other themes happening than like a horror movie.
Sure, and there are elements of the film that draw from the genre,
Mhm.
but in reality, it's like a fairy tale more
Yeah.
than anything, right? So, yeah, it's a great movie. People should go see it. I didn't rank it, but we did. It was number one for a bunch of folks in our voting pool.
Well, and I mean, I guess if you think of something like King Kong, which I'm not sure actually made
Sure.
the top 10, but
And we do
you know,
fantasy.
It made
and
the top 20, but not the top 10.
okay, right? It's not,
Shape of Water seems like a movie that horror fans will adopt because no one else will, if that makes
Right.
sense. Like it's such
Well,
a
and
genre
it's something
film.
that's transitional. Like you can take somebody who's not into horror movies to see it, and both of you are going to enjoy it. It's just very it's very open in its genre-ness.
Yeah,
you
it's
can
exactly
take
what I said
someone
to
who
my
is
wife.
sexually attracted to fish, and they will feel right at home.
I think they call that's a pescatarian.
Yeah.
Dude, I have to say though, Doug Jones, the character actor who does all of like Del Toro's like monsters, is a phenomenal actor. Like he does not get enough credit.
And
Well,
now
he
a
was-
fine senator from Alabama.
I was gonna,
Shows his trip.
yeah. There
I
you go.
understand your point, Cece, but
Got
to
him.
be fair, Doug Jones has been well lauded for a long time, even on this show. Because I remember when we were talking about that short-lived horror TV anthology show that came out, Modern Masters of Horror, I think it was.
Mhm.
There was one episode that came out where he was the only positive we had about that.
No, I mean that's good. I just feel like
Yeah.
like anyone that I've tried to like talk to about Doug Jones, and people who even like I know who like work in the field or do makeup, they're like Doug Jones, like who?
How
And
is
I'm
that-
like, how do
who
you
are these
not
people?
know?
So
How have you
Well,
not
they
seen
work
like
on The Walking
Hellboy?
Dead. I guess they just snatch them up and don't ask for any,
Casey,
Yeah, Hellboy,
education.
Pan's Labyrinth, like literally any movie that has
Yes,
like a
any.
spindly, creepy
Let's-
person in it.
Let's just hope that Doug Jones is sitting in his shitty one-bedroom apartment right now, thinking about ending it all and listening to this show, and
I
decides
think
to
he's
make a
doing
turn.
really well for himself. Like, he has a
Casey,
great family.
Yeah.
Casey, you just
He
tapped.
just won an election.
Casey just tapped like a fold in the back of my brain, and I totally remember. It was
I
Fear.
don't like the phrase "tap to fold." Can
It
I
was
just point that out?
it was Fear Itself, that show they did on NBC that was like a spin-off of Masters
Yes.
of Horror, and it was the Wendigo episode.
Yes.
I
Very
know what you're
good.
talking about.
Booyah! We did that like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
That was OG.
Yeah.
Yeah. So number 9, Shape of Water. People should see it. It's on the list. You'll see it in the write-up.
It probably would have been
Uh,
my top 5 if I saw it.
Moving on to number 8. The movie is Raw. It was on 5 lists. So interestingly, it was number 2 on 2 people's lists. They were Mr. Andy and Mr. John Shelton.
Andy Wood.
No, that makes sense.
So basically, Sophistical just hijacked our list, basically.
So
Yeah.
no, well, so it's really funny. So Cece, I'm gonna toss it to you. I will say I just watched this one as well, and Cece and I ended up having it at number 4 because
Yeah, I
I
think
thought it was friggin'
it wasn't
Yeah.
on my list, but I think there's a lot to love about that movie.
Yeah, I mean, I would have put it further up. There were just some other ones that I, just felt a little more endeared by. But I thought Raw was a tour de force. Like I'm still talking about it and still recommending it. And I really think that, there's a lot to unpack, and that, it's something that you could watch. If you could stomach to watch it multiple times, you would probably enjoy it, after the second viewing. But it's a hard one to get through.
It's such a weird ass movie. I mean, it's like
yeah.
even if you just like movies that are like really unconventional, it's worth a watch.
Well, I mean, like that's straight, like that's intense and visceral bodily horror. Like, and
Yeah,
that is a very like niche genre of
If you love weird French,
blood and guts, and it was
So
heavy.
If you love
you
weird
guys did
French
this on the
shit.
show, and I wasn't
Mhm.
able to join. So I went back and just watched it yesterday because I was like trying to plow through the last couple movies I wanted to get to. I was blown away.
I
and,
mean,
like,
that's how I felt.
The scene where she is eating the sister's finger, I don't think I'd seen a scene that like I was reacting to it so like physically
Yeah.
while watching it. Oh my god!
I mean, there
And-
were several times that I had to pause it and like get up and be like, okay, I just need to like take a second and I'll come back to this. So I mean, it took like 3 hours to watch, and I haven't watched it again since. But the first time, I'm just like, I don't know, it was just a really amazing, like, normally you get these tales of adolescence or like this, this excursion into, like puberty, but it's not as, I mean, I don't know a better word, like it's not as raw as that was, and that was just straight up like,
There you go.
I know I pulled a
Well,
Joe
That
joke
was-
there.
It's a movie.
It was
that's
also
title of the movie.
super duper French,
Oh,
which
yeah.
Oh my
Super
God.
I
French.
actually found like pretty interesting, just like for a change of pace.
Of course
Yeah.
you did, John. You
I-
know what kind of glass wine should be drunk out of.
I thought it was pretty interesting that they were trying to convince me that veterinary school is this really cool exclusive club that only
Yeah, I
the cool
know.
kids get into.
Everybody's having raves at night. And like,
That was the other thing that was really cool to me. It was like this setting was super interesting.
Yeah.
That they did the scene with the horse that they're like putting to sleep.
No,
Yeah.
and,
then
and
there's
the
the
whole
scene
like,
where-
and actually even just the school they shot at was like really cool visually.
Yeah, it was very like Cronenberg esque.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Oh,
actually,
yeah.
yeah.
You know, he has some of those kind of same, I don't know, academic settings. No, the movie it made me think of, Eric, and god damn it, now I'm gonna forget the name of it, but it's the werewolf movie that we love
Ginger
with
Snaps?
the two girls.
Ginger
yes,
Snaps.
Ginger Snaps.
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't like that one either.
Oh, stop it,
Aw.
Joe.
Yes, you
You
did.
get right out of here.
Yeah, that
Look
movie
at
was
Joe
stupid.
coming in here with his edgy
Ginger Snaps was
opinions.
actually the first. You guys did it back when I was a listener, and it was the first time that you loved a movie, and I was like, oh no, these guys aren't always getting it right.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know. I just
That can't
it
be the
had been a-
first time.
The Emperor has no clothes.
I was like sad I wasn't on that Raw episode because I wanted to talk about the movie so much after I finished watching it. But
I know
here we are.
you've shown it tonight in the last 20 minutes where you won't shut up.
All right, Joe. All right. We'll
Kid's got a
move
bedtime,
on.
right?
We'll move on to number 7 for Joe.
We should point out
Um,
really quickly. We should point out is this is a female director, Raw.
Hmm.
It's the
Yeah.
first one on the list. So I don't know, maybe the last. I'm not sure.
Yes. Yeah.
Come on, stats.
Well, No, I was like looking back over the honorable mention. I'm
I
not
just
sure
think
who
in
directed Daryl's Game,
2017, it's worth noting.
but- Yeah.
Is this where we cue the Beastie Boys "Hey Ladies" in the background?
Hey, like, no.
Get funky.
Well, let's hold on that.
Yeah,
Um,
do that.
So number 7, and this one received eight votes. It was number 1 on exactly one list. That list was Eric's. The movie is A Dark Song.
Mm,
Oh,
Ah, so good.
so dark.
Eric, tell us about it.
Much song.
Please.
This year, I don't know. I just really endeavored this year to kind of reward movies that really affected me on a really kind of personal level, like movies that stuck with me. You know what I mean? There were movies I could look back and say, like, look, it was like a great production and it's really solid and it comes together really well. But there was basically no movie this year that I left with more kind of baggage from than A Dark Song. And I feel like the other thing I really championed this year were genre movies that had something to say. And that's kind of been my thing in 2017. My kind of refrain over and over is like, how are we using the genre to say something worthy and important? And it's not that, we can't like hold up fun movies, but something like A Dark Song to me is like the most important work happening in the genre right now. And to me, it was this idea of like a deep exploration of this character's grief over losing her child that just really connected with me. And just the setup is so brilliant. And I always go back to, the whole thing about they can't leave the house, right? It's built up really geniusly. They do the salt line around the house. And remember they bought the meat? They're like, we got to stock up
Yeah.
on meat because we're going to be here for like a year. And like,
Well, they froze it. It was in a freezer.
it's only said. It's only through dialogue. It's like we can't leave here. It's just like this thing, and then it's built up so genius. And then there's this moment later in the film where she's standing on this precipice outside, and it's like terrifying because you don't know what's gonna happen. And like that kind of situational tension is so thick in that movie. I thought the lead actress was just completely brilliant. The weird shaman guy was like batshit crazy, kind of geniusly anti-cast, like that's not the actor you'd expect to do that role, but he kind of nails it.
Oh, yeah.
It's a
well,
movie.
that was the gent from Sightseers, right?
Yeah.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
It's a movie carried by two people as well, and it all leads up to this ending that to me was like, if I think of one image that I think of in horror 2017, it's this image because it's like, it's to me the best of what horror can be, which is to be sublime, not necessarily scary or disgusting or horrifying, but to like be horrifying and beautiful all at the same time, and kind of make you think about things. You know what I mean? And so like I just this movie is so vivid in my mind more than anything else. And my number 2, which is pretty obvious, I think, and probably I'm just gonna guess is the number 1 of this year, is I think pretty.
Settle
I
down.
didn't say what it
Spoilers!
was.
Nice
I'm just
there.
saying it's a pretty like I think the two films are pretty equal, but this was the one that really sort of like got to me inside this year.
I'm actually really bummed. Like, I don't know why I completely flaked on this one when I was doing my list, but I loved this movie. I wish I had added it.
I also super
Yeah.
love the title. It's a cool
Yeah.
title.
Good. Yeah, it's a good title. No, it's a great movie. It's funny, like, so 8 was Raw, was a French film. This is a British film. Again, like, it's not like I'm gonna hit on this a bunch, and I talk about it in the post a little bit, but like the change in distribution and the availability of these movies is just so amazing for genre fans like us, because like a movie like this, you know, we probably don't get a release, you know, certainly not a wide release in the US. It's not readily available. Maybe you get it on DVD at some point, but like this was like a small British movie that gets dropped onto, I think, Netflix, right? I'm pretty sure. And like all of a sudden we all see it. It's like you can tell all your friends. I like texted, someone was texting me the other day and was like, hey, I'm home. I'm watching a bunch of horror movies, like trying to catch up on shit from the year. And I was like, you got to watch Dark Song. Like, I was like, you know, they were basically like anything that's streaming that I should check out. And this was like top of my, you know, recommendation list. So it's just
Texting
crazy to
with
me.
John. What sort of
Sorry, they were
conversation?
Snapchatting me, and I snapped them right back with that one.
Let's take a break from these dick pics for a second and talk movies.
But yeah, I'm really happy this one made the list. I thought it might be a little higher, but I'm honestly just kind of glad that it was represented.
This
Fair.
was number 6 on my list,
Here.
and it was based solely on the fact that finally they showed the realism of living a life of having to shave your back regularly.
Yeah. The best back shaving scene of the year. I wonder, John, I'm curious. I don't know if you can look
Oh
back.
boy.
I don't know if you keep all your old stats, but I'm wondering if I've ever had a number 1 that nobody else had.
Well,
I mean, I would, just based on your personality, I would guess yes.
that one.
I would be shocked if you didn't. If there was ever a year where you had one that everybody else picked.
This also was the year that Eric was like, "Fuck it, I'm doing something different," and you know, But no, the
Hey,
one
we should
year.
also say this is the only year in recent memory that Eric's paid attention. He's like literally dedicated
Yeah.
his entire year to
And honestly,
cultivating his list,
with Joe's
or
help,
at least to telling Joe to cultivate
with
his list.
Joe's
Yeah, I
help.
was going to say Joe's work of cultivating Eric's list as we went through the year actually worked out pretty good.
But
for
like jokes aside, with Joe's help, this has been like such a satisfying year for me as far as genre movies, because I've really been invested and like I've really been thinking about them in a much more deeper way.
So Eric, luckily I do have all of the ones that I've been keeping good stats on up. In 2013, you were the only person to rate one movie number 1. I was going to ask you to guess which movie. You're not even going to come up with it. It was VHS 2.
Wow.
Yes.
What was the
Wow.
actual number 1 that year? I like VHS 2 a lot.
Number 1, that was
Not
a super.
VHS
So
too.
this was the year that there were like 11 different movies
Oh, okay.
ranked number 1. It was Evil Dead.
Yeah, Evil Dead's pretty
Wow.
good. Yeah, I like VHS 2 a lot. I'm not ashamed.
VHS
Apparently.
2. Wow. Yeah. Shit.
Yeah, and again, like if it's funny because if
It's
you were
Eric's
to look,
Terminator 2.
if you were to sort of look, if you were to look at 2013 and compare it to 2017, you'd look at some of these movies on 2013 and be like, holy shit, these were like not that great.
Yeah,
Meanwhile, there's stuff that's like literally in the like 15 to 20 range where you'd be like, this would have been like a top 3 movie in
Yeah.
2013. You know,
Yeah,
like,
there's a couple movies already so far that I haven't seen and I'm pretty sure would have made my list. And like I, obviously had kind of like a lapse portion towards the end of the year, but I was able to catch up pretty well. But I still was cutting things from my list. I wasn't like trying to shoehorn stuff in. I was like really trying to cut stuff. So it really has been a pretty crazy year. And I think John's point about the distribution is probably, I mean, you have more access to movies now than you have at any, prior point in history, honestly.
let's do it.
All
Number
right.
6.
Clearing out the
Number
video.
6 was a wide theatrical release. It appeared on 9 lists. It was number 2 on Colin and Luke's list. The movie was Mother. And I believe out of all of us, I had it at the highest. It was number 6 on my list as well. this is Mother. I also think of this as like one of the more controversial films of the year. I think even if you don't love the sort of message, or if you thought it was overwrought at times, it's impossible to deny how well made it was, how strong some of the acting was. I think some of the sort of like visceral elements, I mean, as Eric said, sort of the images that stick with you. This film had like multiple sequences that have stuck with me.
Yeah.
I think it's a great movie. Again, this was a movie that appeared on a lot of lists, but not a lot of people had it super high. I don't know. So did anybody
Mother-
else have strong feelings?
Mother's such a weird case. So I had it at number 7, and like if you go back to the show and listen to it, I didn't actually enjoy the experience of watching it in the theater, and I said that on the show, but it stuck with me. I could not stop thinking about the movie after I saw it, and I still now can think of so many really crisp images from it. And I really think it's going to be a movie that's held up as like an important piece of filmmaking. But also sometimes it sucks to watch it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Like, I think it's definitely worth watching and worth exploring, you know, like the symbolism, the themes that, you know, he's really trying to get across. But it's one of those movies that the longer it stays with you and the further away you are, the more you can kind of wrap your head around it and make your own, you know, assertion from it.
It also has honestly what might be my favorite movie poster of all time. Jennifer just
with
like
the
holding her heart out.
porcelain doll face.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah, I mean, the acting was just so good. It's a gorgeously made film.
Yeah.
Like the visuals are just amazing. So
remember when those people like wouldn't get off her sink and she kept yelling at them to get off her sink, and then
that's my favorite scene.
and then they broke the sink. Son of a
Do you think
bitch.
I would like this? I've not seen it. I
No,
meant
Joe,
to
you
get
would
it.
you would hate this movie, Joe. I'm not joking.
See, hold on. I actually
No.
think. Well, I think you should watch it. I think,
Yeah, I definitely will.
I think you
just-
should
didn't
watch
have
it
time.
so I can
Yeah.
listen to you be mad at Schnars.
Well, here's the thing. Like, a lot of shit happens in this movie. There's actually like a lot of quote unquote plot. So it's not that it's slow. It's just that it is. I don't know, arcane. Like, I don't know. Like, what's the?
It's not that it's slow. It's
No,
that
I
the
think
plot.
that
The
I
plot
think
is
that
like
it's very-
deliberately. The plot is like deliberately maddening because you don't know what's happening. You're never. It's like, and the way to go in is to know that it's all a metaphor, right? If you go in
Yeah.
looking for any kind of like internal logic in what's happening,
Yeah.
you're gonna leave angry because
Well,
it's
and
like
what I would say, and Joe, to prepare you for when you watch this,
Yeah.
the last 30 minutes are like
bonkers.
legit batshit crazy.
Yeah.
So
I feel like you need to prepare yourself for this guy's movies anyway. Like if you go in
Yeah.
expecting like a straightforward film, you're
Yeah.
you're
yeah, I'm
Yes,
gonna have a good
to-
time snapping your fingers and
I haven't seen it yet either, and I've been a little afraid just hearing the feedback. But I'll get there.
Yeah, I think that like preparing yourself going in, like, okay, this is a very verbose movie. Like, there's a lot of like the plot is this tangled, you know, metaphorical explanation of multiple different things. I think knowing that, you might enjoy it a little bit more than going in uninhibited.
I mean, as any kind, if you consider yourself any kind of like cinematic tourist, it's kind of a movie you have to see once. I feel
Right.
like.
yeah.
and
Well,
I
I
do.
think-
You guys all know that about me.
It's how
Well-
Joe introduces himself.
Joe collects
on
movie
perfect.
picks. Joe,
Uh,
I insist on putting it in my work email signature.
well, and I'll say I didn't like the movie when I saw it, and I kind of expressed that on the podcast. But the further away I am from the movie, and the more like I talk to other people about it, I find myself saying that I like the idea. I still can't say that I enjoyed watching it, but I like the idea behind the movie a little bit better. For
I mean,
sure.
it's a testament to how confounding the movie is that
Right.
I didn't like it. By the end of the show, I was like, "This movie's brilliant," and now it's in my top 10 list, and I still am like conflicted over it. It's just like
Yeah.
it's just the way it
worth
is.
seeing just for the act. I mean, Michelle Pfeiffer
Is unreal?
is amazing.
Yeah.
in this movie. So
she was
And-
also great in the Bernie movie,
Dude.
made for HBO.
She's incredible in
Oh,
that
yeah.
movie. She is.
Bernie Madoff.
Also, Mother. Well, we can move on, but Mother has the best cameo of the year, about three
I
quarters way
wanna hear
through.
it.
I won't say it, but
oh, I want to guess now.
I'll
Is
text
it
you.
Will Ferrell? Does
I'll
Will
take it.
Ferrell show up?
actually,
a
Joe,
former
you're not
SNL
Joe, you're not
actress.
as far off as you think.
I was gonna say Bill Murray.
Wow, I'm
man.
kind of excited now. I'm gonna try and check this out.
John, did
this
you
week.
figure it out?
I know. Yeah, I know
Okay,
exactly.
okay.
What you mean.
All right, what's next?
All right, let's move it on. We are moving into the top 5. It's actually an interesting transition point because I think in the top 5, most of these films, and there's one out of the top 5 that is the exception, are very sort of, I would say, more accessible than Mother. And number 5 is sort of like the perfect example. So the film is Split.
Nice.
It received 14 votes. So out of 16, this was on. We're now the rest of the films are on most of the list.
I'm
is one way to think about
I'm
it.
shocked it's so low, to be honest with you.
Well,
Yeah.
so here's the thing: Split's
Scott, who
highest
directed
position.
this movie? Can you tell me who the director of this movie is?
It won M. Night Shyamalan.
Bruce Willis, I think.
Shyamalan.
It was part of the. I used in the write up the
That's-
Shalaman.
that's when-
Shalama sounds. How do you
Mark,
say it, Mark?
that's when a melon is like doesn't like to talk to other people.
Oh, I
Yeah,
see.
shy melon.
Oh, I like
Um,
that. I like it.
No, but so Eric,
Not to
to
be
your
confused
point,
with Koi Melon.
Eric, to your point, this was the highest position this was on anybody's list was number 3. And I'm going to kick it. It actually was number 3 on Joe, Mark, and Casey's list. I'm going to kick it to Casey to tell us his thoughts here.
So first of all, James McAvoy, I'm going to be honest, he's dreamy. And he was kind of
Agree.
masterful in this part. Watching him play all these different parts, I think, was like the most exciting part about this movie. But then if you expand from that on how great James McAvoy was in this movie, there's actually a solid story written about this. We didn't get too crazy in the twist department for Shyamalan. There was some Easter eggs that were revealed at the end of this movie that made just about every film watcher at the theater go, "Oh shit!" So it's exciting, really, for what he is building up here as well. I don't want to go into spoilers or anything like that, but watching really this movie, the entire thing and the rating, it was number 3 on mine, as John said. It all hinges on James McAvoy's performance because he played all these different personalities and he really played them masterfully for a genre flick, and it was really impressive to watch.
James
Yeah, to
McAvoy
me,
is
to me, this
friggin'
really
brilliant
felt
in this
like
movie.
he never went through that period of making shitty movies, and he just kept making
Right.
good movies.
Yeah.
That's exactly
I mean,
how it felt.
in kind of in more ways than one, right? This ties into his other movies, and that's what Casey was alluding to. But yeah, it feels like he never dropped off, and he kind of just like kept making really great movies.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's Shyamalan, not McAvoy, that Mark's pointing out there.
Yeah.
Important to note. There was definitely a down period of this guy's movies, and he's back. Go watch Unbreakable again, and then rewatch this one and get excited.
I wonder if, like, I didn't like Unbreakable when I saw it, but I mean, I literally saw it when it came out, so it's been however many years. So I wonder if I watched it now, having loved Split, if I would like it better.
I honestly
used
don't
to-
know.
I used to keep Unbreakable in my employee pick section at the video store when I worked at the video store.
Nice. Okay,
Yeah.
I guess I'm gonna have to watch it again.
Yeah, I really liked it. I mean,
You are
this
that
movie
guy.
to me, it's funny. I think if Split had come out in like November, it probably would have been higher on people's lists. It's thinking back on it, it's really tense. It's really well made. You know, I sort of compared it to Mother and saying if Mother is sort of less accessible or more art house-esque, this is, I think, way more accessible, sort of
yeah.
more of a mainstream, almost thriller. But it's really well done. And Casey with James McAvoy, like, he is incredible in this movie. So
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
really it does make it.
Phenomenal.
for
It's
sure.
funny. I was like, I can't believe it isn't higher, and then I looked at my list and I had it at number 5. So there you go.
There you go.
Never mind. It's perfect.
Yeah, and really, as far as if you want to look at this compared to other Shyamalan movies, this one is actually fairly simple as far as like plot structures and stuff goes for Shyamalan.
Well,
He's
and that's
not
what-
trying to do anything too crazy.
Right, and that's like when we talked about The Visit, it was like a return to just
Yeah.
making really cool, scary movies.
I
Like
mean,
The
it-
Visit was sort of twisty, but barely, and this one was just not twisty at all. I mean, the closest thing to a twist would be the revelation of like where the little bunker they were at.
Well, no, I mean, then
You know,
kind
was,
of like
but-
what happened, like his ultimate kind of transformation
Well,
at the end, but
the,
it's not that
post-credit-
twisty.
Yeah, like that sort of thing.
Well,
sure,
that
like,
part, but
No,
I
I
mean,
think-
no,
yeah,
I
even
mean the
what
like
Eric's saying.
he turns into a monster basically, like.
right.
Spoiler
But
alert.
but even that like
Twist.
was
He split.
But it was like it was a fun twist. It wasn't like, oh, the director's in the movie and he's been gone the whole time. I'm still bitter about Lady in the Water.
Also, though, it's not.
You
I
know?
mean, it's not really a twist because like even in the trailers they started laying it out, so it's more just kind of a natural plot
Which is more
progression.
of like right, it's more of a cool
Yeah.
plot point than like a ha gotcha, and that's cool. I think that's really, I don't know who, if he's like has a different writing partner or what happened, but someone was just like, hey man, dial it back a little bit, and then he started making awesome movies again. So
Well,
that's
what?
these are
The guy's
weren't
like,
these all Blumhouse? Didn't I think Blumhouse? I know
interesting.
Blumhouse did The Visit. I don't know if they were involved in Split,
his
but
new writing partner's like, what if we did this, but not trash?
what if we just made a movie that was not bad?
Yeah, have you
What if
thought
we-
about this? I mean, like, I think it really might bring your career back if you made a not shitty movie.
well,
Yeah.
don't write yourself into the film as God. Let's just
Yeah.
start there. And,
I would say that I'm with
maybe.
you. Don't do that.
Stephen
I'm
King,
like-
are you listening?
It's been 10 years since I've seen that movie, and I'm still so fucking mad about it.
But we're back. We are in the Shyamala sans. Mark,
Whoa,
Mark, say it
that's
for me, please.
awesome.
Shamala.
Shamala
Jesus
sans.
Christ, you're making me forget what his
Oh.
actual last name is. Shamalasance, I think, is
Yeah,
what
that's what he just said.
All right,
I
there we
don't
go.
think that's what John said, but it was close.
I was in the neighborhood. All right, let's move along.
I like
number-
also Shalamasance.
Or like a
because why
shama,
not?
a shamalu, or like a shamalution.
All right.
I'm gonna put that in the Champersances.
Number 4, the film is Happy Death Day.
Mm.
Also
wow.
on 14 lists.
Yes.
It was number 2 on 2 lists. And we're going to kick it over to Joe, who had it at number 2.
Oh, it's my mother-in-law just walked into the door. I watched this one like sort of last minute. As you guys, I'm literally like, this is the most uncomfortable moment of my life. I just like sort of like the like super. It had like a super sort of like '90s vibe to it, and I actually wasn't on the show when we watched this in the theaters. I caught it just before I did my list, and I think it was just like a fun sort of throwback to like college movies, especially like those old like college horror movies. And what was it, like Sorority Row? We did the remake of like years ago,
Yeah.
and then like the original version also. Like I just love those old kind of like school movies. And it was just like a fun take, and they even goofed about it in the movie, but like a fun take on like Groundhog Day, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
And it was just like, I think like we have like Split, and there's other movies that are on this list, like Mother, which I haven't watched, but like those are like super heavy. Like this was just like a fun horror movie, which I thought was
Yeah.
something
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah,
it's like
I agree.
it's gleeful. Like it was kind of the word
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
came to on the
Yes.
show. Like it's just
Exactly.
jubilant and like bright and neon and fun.
It's
And
also, it's very balanced. Like it's aware of how referential it is without being annoying about it.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
very much just like
it's also proof to me that like I can still get into a movie that's like that, that's just kind of goofy and referential, but it has to be great. Like it has to
Right.
well,
be.
it also proves the point that we've been making for years, which is like in the sort of the first couple of years of this podcast, we were always like, if a movie's PG-13, it's complete garbage, it's awful. And this kind of proves our point that like just because a movie is PG-13 doesn't mean it has to be total garbage. This movie's really funny. It is like scary enough in the way that slashers are. You know what I mean? And like it really just kind of proves that if you write a great movie, if it's lovingly executed, and if it's just kind of like light and fun, then you can't really get much better than that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
I think that's the biggest thing from what Mark's saying there. Because for me, we start seeing this movie. We start seeing this movie advertised. It's marketed towards that tween crowd, PG-13. It's stuff that we typically we're all guilty of automatically writing it off. This is going to be crap. It's PG-13. It's for teens. I'm not going to like it. You get in there. You got to give it some points and some credit for being so enjoyable throughout, from beginning to end, and still be owning up to that marketing plan and everything that they had for it. It still was kind of a teenage horror movie, PG-13, but they did it really well. It was well crafted.
I'll be honest, like I just watched this last weekend. I didn't realize until you guys were talking about it that it was even PG-13. Like it didn't feel like it at all.
Yeah.
Like it didn't feel like I was like missing anything like gore or like swearing wise.
Well,
Yeah,
No,
definitely.
no.
would you be
there
surprised?
was-
Would you be surprised to hear, John or Joe, that a lot of neckbeards complained about it being PG-13 on the internet?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Which I'm sure, honestly, like 10 years ago when this first started, like we probably
Where's
would've
the
too.
tits?
Jesus Christ, Mark.
Oh.
I actually thought this was
That
the
to be my
most
ringtone.
fun. It was and Joe sort of got it. It's the most fun that you can have in the genre this year. Like just
Yeah.
pure fun. And like it compares. You're not always going to horror for like a fun time, you
Right.
know, but this was a good time. It was like a college movie, as Joe said, but not, I don't know, but without skimping on it being horror.
Well,
so.
and I really liked that. I forgot what movie we were just talking about that kind of transcends. Oh, like Shape of Water. Like it's something that you don't have to be in the genre to appreciate, and I like that. You know, it's just a overall genuinely good fun time that happens to be a slasher movie.
Just the baby face, like the mascot of the fucking
Yeah,
school being the babies or whatever
Yeah.
they were. Were they the babies? Was that what they were called? The fighting babies? I don't know.
Something like that.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, the mask really is just A plus.
It's ludicrous.
It can't be
I,
understated how great that mask is.
I think they should put Mark's quote on the DVD cover.
I would say for me, I'm a little surprised that this ended up higher than Split on the list.
I don't know. I mean, I think that kind of, you know, solidifies what I was saying is that like it's something that you don't have to necessarily be like, I don't know, there's no underlying like, you know, there's nothing underlying besides to have a good time. And Split, like some people I can see why some people didn't like Split.
Well,
Yeah.
definitely
Well, I
it
think that's
occupies
fair.
a spot, right? Like your top 10, let's say 1 through 9 are Black Coat's Daughter, and then you're like, what was a movie that I really just enjoyed, and it's also fun, and you get to throw this movie in. It's
this a
like
riddle?
it's the
I was gonna say, I mean, it's
it's
pretty
the
high
feel
on,
good movie of 2017.
yeah, it's pretty high on my list, and my list is full of pretty like heavy movies. So
Yeah, I mean,
I think
Casey,
that
to your point, at this point, like they were on almost the exact same number of lists. It's just was slightly higher than Split on most, and that's why it ends up.
I'm not knocking it and saying it doesn't deserve to be higher. I'm just surprised just because to me, I got more into probably the Shyamala Renaissance or whatever we decided we were going to call it. I think I was more
Close
appreciative
enough.
of that, and that weighed more on my vote for that probably. So it is interesting though, but I think actually Cece's point's really good though. I think this definitely has more of a mainstream appeal to it. So more kudos to it.
Yeah.
With
But I think
that,
John has a valid
Yeah,
point
okay.
too. Sorry, I don't mean to
no,
keep
Joe,
this going, but
get
like
in there.
I think if I had seen Split like a month ago versus like earlier in the year, it may have ended up higher on my list also. Like it's just, you know,
Yeah.
it's kind of where the cards fall. There's
True.
no relevant point there. Like we should have just moved on before I started rambling. Let's just go. What kind of bees make milk? Boobies.
oh wow.
Eric
Oh,
is
man.
gonna get real upset with us by the time this is over.
No,
All
I'm
right,
good.
guys. Number 3. It's funny because Mark gave us a little shout out here. Number 3 is The Black Coat's Daughter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also appeared on 14 lists. It was the highest
Please do not call
position.
me.
I've got something in
No,
my front
the
pocket
highest
for
position
you.
was number 2.
Mm.
It was number 2 on both my list and Cece's list.
Oh, nice.
Because
Hell yes.
we are super friends. Cece, tell
Super-
us about Black Coat's Daughter.
Yeah, so Black Coat's Daughter, I had heard a lot of people talk about how they didn't really like it, that it was, you know, too much, it was too slow and it just kind of, you know, meandered a bit. But I thought it was this really great, like, smoldering gothic tale of, you know, the search for, like, you know, acceptance and something bigger. And I was actually just telling somebody to watch this because the ending of this movie really made it for me. And, you know, not to give it away, but like it's the ending, it happened and I was like, wow, you could have either gone really like the safe way or you just leaned into it. And I really appreciated they were like, nope, this is what the movie's about. So this is what's happening.
It's like the most
And-
horrifying movie stabbing that I've ever seen.
Yes. I mean, it was
yeah.
like there's some brutal kills in there, but it was just, you know, I really liked like it was not necessarily choppy, but they chopped up the storyline so that you're, you know, intentionally kind of discombobulated
Yeah.
and you don't really know what's happening and you're set against this, you know, boarding school that's already kind of weird and it had a lot of really spooky vibes that was amazing. And I'm pretty sure it was directed by Oz Perkins, right?
It was.
Yeah, so I've realized that I've definitely become a fan of his because he did I'm the Pretty Thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Pretty Thing
Yeah.
That Lives in the House.
So
yeah, that was
it's a little,
interesting.
I would say that it's a little different from that movie, just in terms of like that one was a little too slow.
You can
It's like
totally
his third movie is gonna be like a real normal paced movie.
You
'cause
can- you
the-
can totally
the
see
first-
the-
Yeah, he's picking up pace.
You can totally see his style there, though.
Oh yeah, I mean it's super
Yeah.
stylistic, but I mean it's not so stylistic that it takes away from what's happening. Like it's very immersive, very atmospheric, and I loved it. I was super drawn in, and I mean I was game for it as soon as I started it. So
Yeah, I mean, like this movie with a dark song for me, I kind of pair the two
Mhm.
up in my head because they were like really dark indie movies that both just left a really deep impression on me. And
yeah,
it's like
for sure.
it's probably the only movie I look at my list. It's probably the only movie that actually scared me this year, where
Mhm.
it gave me the like what I call like I don't want to turn the light off after I'm done
Yeah.
watching the movie. That kind of vibe.
Yeah, I will say I watched it home alone, and afterwards, like my house creaks a lot, and I was
Yeah.
like, nope, we're just gonna pretend like it's okay.
It's really unsettling movie.
To me, this was the like most classic genre, horror genre film that we
Mhm.
saw a year. And it's you mentioned Oz Perkins, like he's someone I'm like super interested in. It's
Yeah.
Anthony Perkins' son.
Yeah.
So he has this like super weird legacy in the genre, obviously.
Right.
Like it's pretty rare that your dad is like this like sort of somewhat of a horror icon. And
Yeah, you'd think it's almost like only one person is their dad is Anthony Perkins.
yeah, well, I just mean like anyone could have a dad who's a horror icon, but that ends up being a competent director and
Right,
competent
like,
to
and-
like very good.
My
sure.
my dad is Leatherface.
Yeah.
But like I
Kane Hodder's kid is coming up strong.
Zane Hodder.
Turns out, weird twist of fate, Candyman is my dad.
Jesus. But I agree with you, John. Like it's really interesting that he has such a distinctive voice that's not influenced by his dad's legacy. Like he has.
His dad
he-
might just have had him watching like crazy
Well,
fucking movies.
Okay,
the
I
whole
mean,
time
like
growing
at
up.
least it's not like it doesn't look very Hitchcockian. Like it's very watching an Oz Perkins movie, you're like, oh, I'm pretty sure this is his. Like I get.
Well,
Yeah.
And again, we've talked about it previous with some of the other movies, but and Eric, your comparison to A Dark Song is interesting because like I think we watched them within like 2 or 3 weeks
We
of each
did.
other.
Yeah, we
like
did.
we watched them very close together.
Yeah.
They are very small in
Yeah.
terms of the cast, and then the settings are very small. And like they're these, we're living in like a high time of small films and
Yeah.
small films that are really affecting and have. It's funny to even call the script. I mean, the script for Dark Song was pretty interesting because obviously there's a lot of sort of mythos or like research that has to go in there. Here, it's just like 2 or 3 girls like walking around a school that's like kind of
Right.
empty and like
Yeah.
random shit happening. But I don't know. It ends up being really, really affecting. I agree.
Well, he was kind of masterful too with playing with the timelines and stuff as he was
Mhm.
showing those. So that was really great. But to comment further, like on what you were saying, John, we're in the age of like small films and stuff right now, and it really kind of points to how the whole landscape of film is changing because we have Netflix and Hulu and Filmstruck and all these different streaming services. So you don't have to wait for the big theatrical
Right.
releases. For me as a movie geek, while I'm not necessarily like an academic movie geek, it's really exciting because you're going to get your hands on stuff without a whole lot of effort. And
Yeah.
this is the kind of films you're going to find.
Well, and you know, to even take that a step further, so Oz Perkins, I'm pretty sure. I mean, we talked about this on the episode, so go back and listen to this episode. But the I Am the
But I'm
Pretty
gonna
Thing That
read
Lives
it
in the
right quick.
House, which I think we watched right after Black Coat's Daughter.
Yeah, because
was-
y'all were telling me to watch it.
Yeah, so that was produced for Netflix. So basically,
Mhm.
what happened was Black Coat's Daughter was actually in like the festival circuit in 2015. Didn't get a release until this year, but I guess some producers or some executives at Netflix had seen it, loved it so much, kind of saw that he had this interesting voice, as Cece mentioned, and was just like, make another movie. And the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House is an even smaller film, if that's possible. I think
Yeah,
it it's like one character. So I didn't love it as much as this, but Casey, to your point, like you're seeing these new production models where it's not just about things being available. I think that's actually a really important part, obviously, especially with foreign stuff. But some of it's just like Amazon, Netflix throwing money around and saying like, here's $1 million, just go make something because we know that people are going to watch this. They're going to watch your other movie as well. So you're getting new movies that like really legitimately would not have been made previously. So
and
Yeah.
it's
Lord.
just to say that like
We
as a
gotta move on.
consumer, it can suck because you have to pay for all these different streaming services, but at the same time, you get the benefit of all these studios trying to one up each other. So I'll let it drop there because I could talk about that all night.
This movie
All right,
good.
number
No,
two.
I wanted
Are
to
we
hear
at
what
number
Joe
two
had to say
now?
about
Are
it.
we good?
So- all right.
For the record,
we're
I'm
moving on.
perfectly comfortable right now. So
Yeah, no, it's really Joe that's driving us forward. This is a
I
unique
just
position
feel
for
like
us.
I just listened to a synopsis of the film from you, like that
Did you
drawn
see-
out.
Joe, have you seen the movie?
Yeah, I liked
forgot.
it. It was
I
on my
zoned out.
list.
What movie were you even
Alright,
talking
I
about?
didn't.
All right.
I didn't feel the need to babble for 20 minutes about it, but I mean, I liked it. It was
Okay.
good.
All right, Joe. What do we do here? We have a podcast, my friend. All right.
what
number
are we
two,
doing? That's a great question.
We're in the top two. I think you guys can all probably predict where we're headed here. But number two is It.
Hmm.
Interestingly, It
Never heard of it.
was only on
Unfamiliar.
12 lists out of the 16. So several folks actually either didn't see it or did not rank it.
I actually like last minute bumped it from my list. Like
I
totally.
know you did. We can get into that, but it was number 2 on.
All right, edgy guy.
Where it was
Just saying.
it was number 2 on 4 lists. Evan, Chris, Casey, and Mark. Mark, could you tell us about how you felt about it?
Well, you see, it was a movie about a clown. I think it really.
In a world.
It was interesting.
pretty good.
Because I think that like when you first there was they released the poster with the first image of like the new Pennywise, and like if I could put my neckbeard hat on again, or it was like, oh god, they really like fucked it up this time, like, and
Throw him.
so I think that it in a way benefited from like reasonably low expectations, completely ignoring the fact that the original It sort of miniseries was just completely fucking bonkers, and the only reason that people look back on it fondly was because they were children. But I think that the movie itself, it taps into something like a Super 8 or a Stranger Things, which is these movies that are centered around kids that have these very strong friendships that everyone identifies with. And to me, like, even more so than the like scares in the movie, that really holds it all together. And then you do have like what starts off as sort of a goofy looking villain, but honestly brings some like pretty unique scares to it. There's like a weird kind of trippy quality about it. I just thought that overall, like, we were talking about Split, that sometimes simplicity is kind of just the way to go. And I feel like even though there's some like weird convoluted stuff in it, like there always has been, it really is just like, this is a fucking scary clown movie where a group of friends see crazy shit and it scares them, and like that's it, that's the whole movie. But sometimes a movie that's that simple is like exactly what you need, right?
See, I would argue it's deeper than that. I mean, you're not wrong, but in some ways, like,
No,
to
the way
me,
you
and-
said that, makes it sound like he's wrong.
You're not wrong, but you're definitely wrong.
No, and I like, listen, I had this very
Here's
high
a
on my list.
45-minute discussion as to why.
Oh, Joe. I like, it is a creepy clown movie, and it is a super well done creepy clown movie. But I think what this does is it, in some ways, it sort of like saves a lot of the Stephen King film oeuvre, right? Like, there's been a really mixed history, in my opinion, of bringing Stephen King books to the screen. I think you mentioned like the It miniseries that was on TV, and like, it was a complete shit show. I haven't seen it in years. I'm sure it would be almost embarrassing to go back and watch. At the same time, like, I think that movie actually does hit on a lot of what King, what makes his books really kind of like powerful. And this movie makes that more accessible, and actually, like, the script plus the acting plus the directing, like, all pulls it together into a package that's it's very energizing. Like, you're pulled through it in a really powerful way. And then I thought the characters were all really engaging. I mean, it's tough to have the books. I mean, Stephen King's books, like, notoriously will have like 5 or 6 main characters, and you get multiple different POVs and yada yada. This does a fair bit of that, and it does it in a 2-hour movie, and it does it like pretty convincingly.
Well, Eric and I talked about this kind of offline because he was telling me how cool he was for not including it in his list. But like, one thing about this movie is
He is cool, Mark. All right, just to be clear.
Just
but
saying, yeah.
the point that the weird thing is the point that we both agreed on, which was the reason that I think it was number 2 on my list and didn't make Eric's list, is like this movie is actually so well done. I don't want to say that it's safe, but it's not.
It is kind of safe. It's just kind of
It
like
is well.
yeah.
It's the
certainly
reason
like
it
quote-unquote
excels
mainstream.
because it exceeded everyone's expectations, and like people hear like remake and they're like, oh, it's gonna be garbage, whatever. It's actually, this is kind of a perfect remake. So like either you're inspired by it or you're not, right?
No,
Yeah,
listen,
so
I
really
like for
quick,
the
like,
record
only
too.
thing
Like
that-
I think this movie is pretty good. Like I don't have any problems with
Yeah.
it at all. It just didn't. It like didn't stick with me, and so at the end of the day, like I had other things coming up that I wanted to kind of reward with like spots on the list, and I was like, like just I didn't have enough passion for it, I guess.
I agree. Like, I do think it's faded for me over time. Like, I still had it pretty high on my list. And I think it's also tough to like put this movie so high in a world where like Stranger Things came out like a few months before it, and there's
Yeah.
obviously similarities between the two. So to me, like that took away from it a little bit. But
Like,
I mean,
it's a
I
lot
think
more
the
important for me to put like Dark Song on my list than it is for me to
Yeah.
put it on my list because I know people are gonna see it if they want to see it.
but I think like back to the point we made about with the Happy
Split.
Death Day. Like, I think this is like a nice in between of like Happy Death Day and like a dark song where it's like it's a little more on the serious side, but it's still kind of lighthearted. Like, I saw this at the drive-in, and it was like the perfect movie to see at a drive-in. Like, it was fun, but it was still where like Happy Death Day, I don't think it was like super scary. It was more on just like the fun side. Like, this I thought was still like super creepy, but had a lot of fun moments, and I thought the kids in it were amazing. Like, they really kept it a little like more lighthearted, but still like that clown was like super creepy, and I thought they did a really good
Well,
job.
Yeah, no,
yeah,
yeah.
and I think one thing that's like really important to talk about in the context of this film is that, and this will sound silly, either Mark or Eric, one of you just mentioned like this was almost like too mainstream or something. Like, it was the number 1 all-time R-rated horror movie. Like,
I think
by,
those
like, a
numbers were
mile.
like a little fudgy or something. There was something to do with
Hold on.
inflation or something.
Well, sure.
remember
you
reading a
can-
thing
you-
about it.
It is only that is
It was
only
big.
in comparison. That's only in comparison to The Exorcist. The Exorcist made a ton of money back in the day, and if you then compare in like inflation and adjusted dollars, whatever, the opening that this film had, it made $120 million at opening. Like, that's
It
like
was huge, yeah.
Marvel fucking superhero opening. You know, I mean, like it's unheard of for a horror movie to open at that big a number.
Well,
And so, like,
Yeah.
obviously, this movie is super accessible. Like, it had the biggest opening ever.
we
for an
talked
R-rated horror
about it
movie.
too. I think what it proves is that the character of Pennywise far transcends both the book and the original adaptation. Like
For sure.
Pennywise is a character that would show up on a Simpsons Treehouse of Horror episode, and people would go, "Oh, the creepy clown!" Like, even if they haven't seen it, you know what I mean? It's just like it's Ronald McDonald and fucking Mario and it. Like, it is just like it is. I don't know if he's in that virtual reality movie that's coming out, but I feel like he should be.
Virtuosity 2.
No.
Ready Player One.
Yeah,
Ready
Ready
Player
Player
One.
One. You know what I mean? Like, it's the kind of character that would show up in that movie. I feel
Yeah,
like.
like what I can't believe you guys figured out Ready Player One
Like,
from that. Like, what the fuck is that?
Casey knows what I'm talking
Thank
about.
Yeah, I knew what he's
But
talking
But no,
about.
I just like
Thank
that.
you.
That's
That
what
newfangled that Atari movie that came out.
that's what it proved. Like, that
Yes.
character has so
That's not
much.
far off. I would have gotten
That character has so much like cachet now in pop culture, and now we're gonna get it movies forever now because of what the studios learned from that movie.
I think it helps
Oh,
describe
that's
too
fur.
that despite how bad that previous TV movie was and how good Tim Curry was in that movie, I think it proves that had more of a cultural cachet than anybody gives it credit
Oh, it
for,
was
despite how bad it was.
It was iconic.
And the fact that everybody's happy because what's his name, Bill Skarsgård, that played Pennywise in this movie, gave us a different Pennywise that was different from Tim Curry's. He didn't outshine him. He gave a kind of a different performance, and it didn't murder anybody's childhood, so to speak. So I think that was a big plus too. because
my
it's-
childhood was murdered by literally everything that ever happened. So
yes, as we've seen from the Last Jedi reviews and talk on the internet, we know that while as stupid as that argument is, that's a big go-to, especially for like internet critics and stuff like that. And Bill Skarsgård kind of honored that in his performance. He didn't outshine or overshine him. He gave us something different.
Yeah.
And that, I mean,
also,
history
like
has.
this is the first movie in years to be parodied on SNL, which I think, to John's
Oh my
point, just
God.
speaks to its sort of mainstream
Kelly Wise.
significance.
Kelly Wise. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty,
So there you go.
Pretty good.
Cool.
All right.
Oh, so
It was a good
anyone
movie.
want to put money on what number one is? I can't imagine what number, but
So-
I just think
Wild
it's
West too. Come on.
I'm
give it to
going
me.
with Leatherface.
well, it's just fascinating because, to John's
Well,
point, like I do
Wild
remember
Wild
those
West.
years where it was like really hard to pick a number one. To me, this year, more so than any year I
Yeah.
can ever remember on the show, was just like, what else could it possibly be?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mark, I have stats on that actually. So
Mark,
let's come back to it. But
Mark, I might argue it should be a dark song. I'm just kidding.
You had your chance, man.
oh, Eric.
Settle
Hey,
down.
Eric, you
You-
forgot to push your glasses up.
No, I did,
before you
actually.
said that.
I'm trying to
So-
push him up to the screen.
So, number one, a film called Get Out that you might be familiar with.
Never heard of it.
This was it. I believe it might be the first time ever that a movie has appeared on all ballots, because even in past years, so like last year, The Witch was number one, and it's one person didn't rate it because they didn't see it or something. So it's actually like
Was that
pretty
me?
rare for
I think it was
something.
me.
It might have been Joe. I think it was Joe because we watched it together.
The
We
only
had a-
other like super
fun.
unanimous
Yeah,
thing
yeah.
I always think of in the history of the show would be Cabin in the Woods.
It was Cabin in the Woods, and even that, I have to. I don't know if I have the stats. I'm gonna go back and try and look. But so yeah, this was number one on 12 lists. As I mentioned, we had three number ones. We had Get Out was number one on 12 lists. Eric had a dark song, which several people have heard about at this point, and then The Shape of Water had a couple number ones. But I actually was gonna kick this to Joe to talk about.
Oh, you're fucked.
I'm gonna guess your mother-in-law's not in the room anymore.
No, wait. I closed the door. She's
God.
she's right next to me. No, I mean, I think, and it's been a while since I've seen this. I actually want to go back and rewatch it, but I just remember like how much we all enjoyed this. You shouldn't have come to me. I mean, I think it was like the perfect balance of like quote unquote message and like scary horror movie. Like, I think from the trailers you kind of got this idea that like maybe we were going to be beat over the head with this like message that he was trying to hammer home, but then when you got in the theater, like it was actually like just a legit like scary horror movie, and like the acting in it was amazing. Like right down, I forget the main character's name, but like I thought he played this like perfectly, and then the parents I thought were like just the right amount of creepy, and it like kept you guessing the entire time. And you know, even towards the end where you get kind of the quote unquote twist, like I didn't see that coming. I don't think anybody did. And like, I think then it takes like a pretty hard turn. And the most frightening thing was this girl eating cereal with no milk on her bed at the end of the movie, which might be the creepiest moment in cinematic.
You
Well, you know-
Do you say that's better or worse than not preheating your oven?
You know what's
Well-
funny is Schnars, there was that interview with Bloom, who was saying that
Blum.
in the original trailer for Get Out, the studio and him, they wanted to include the shot where she was holding the keys from him, and Keegan or not Keegan, the other guy, Jordan Peele was like, you can't have that shot, and it literally ruins the whole movie.
Yeah.
And they literally argued about it for weeks, and they finally gave in to him. And then and Bloom, Mr. Bloom there,
But
and
they did
in
still
the
have
podcast
shot
interview
where
was like,
she was like loading a gun, which
but
which
you think
was-
she's defending him or whatever.
Yeah, but
You think
like
that,
that
like,
doesn't
she's
give
the
away
one
much.
person-
It was. I just thought it was
Yeah.
really interesting because then late in that same podcast, he's like, "Yeah, we were 1,000% wrong, and I'm so glad that we like trusted him on that."
I
Absolutely.
mean, it's the thing that's so crazy to me about this movie
That's
is that
where the
like
tension comes from.
I'm a huge fan of Key and Peele. I think that like our love for the Gremlin sketch on Key and Peele is well documented. I think Jordan Peele is
Yeah.
awesome. I actually loved Keanu. It was so fucking stupid, but it had that kind of like Lonely Island, Hot Rod vibe about it that I really liked. That it was so dumb that it was
Yep.
really. And I think that like everyone's response when they heard that Jordan Peele was directing a horror movie is like, oh, cool. Like he's a genre guy. He likes these things. He's going to be pretty reverent. It's going to be pretty fun. I don't think anyone guessed that this movie was going to be this fucking good. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It really is like, it's, no movie's perfect, but it was really just insane. And also, like, I tried to make this point on my list a little bit, that, like, most voices in horror are white male voices. And so, like,
That's not just horror, Mark. That's actually just like
Life.
it's
filmmaking. in
just
general.
life.
like
General.
everywhere, right? That's
Yeah.
just like the world. But
I mean,
Listen, it can't be overstated. Like, Get Out is a hugely important movie, and it's kind of the best of what horror can be, which is that it is it it, it is deeply addressing like very intense, hard to talk about issues. It is, but it's also a great thriller, and that's kind of when horror is at its best, because it can be a good movie and it can be accessible, and then kind of bring these other issues into the mix and make you think about things that you maybe hadn't before.
also no
Yeah.
better year for this
That's
movie
what I
than
meant when I was
2017.
rambling like that.
Well,
like I
that's-
said.
Well, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
The timing is so key. Like, that's 100%. Like, 2017 is the year that needed this movie, and I think that 2018 needs more movies like Get Out.
No, I think you could have.
Oh yeah.
It would have been impossible. When they greenlit this movie, when they heard the pitch and they were like, Jordan Peele wants to make a horror movie, there's no way they could have predicted all the shit that went down in this country,
Yeah.
the political environment.
And it came
And
out
so
like in the middle of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, dude, this came out before Charlottesville. Like this,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
feels more relevant and more like prescient, and it's where the word augur comes in. Like, is this like it like portended so much shit that went on, and Jordan Peele was like, I think the argument he would make is that he's been making comedy sketches about this
Right.
shit
Yeah.
for years.
Well, that's
and
what
like,
he said, right? That he didn't
Yeah.
start this as a horror movie. It was more like satirical to begin with, right?
Yeah, and I can't agree with Eric more. Like, this is like what horror is at its very best, is that it shines the like sort of like light back on us, right, and in society, and it pulls out insecurities and anxieties and then turns them into sort of these things that we can work through
Yeah.
in the film. And it's it's
Like,
also just a really really good movie.
Because
that's what it
because
comes
horror
down to.
because horror is dealing with these like base human emotions, right? When it's done really well, it can cause a kind of self-reflection that I think other genres can't readily get to in the same way.
Yeah.
And Get Out is like a perfect example of that.
Yeah, the kicker for me is I was on this episode for this show, for Get Out, and I didn't get to see it like opening weekend. I don't think I got to see it the entire weekend. I think I saw it on like a Tuesday night before we recorded. So I spent the entire weekend seeing people posting on Facebook, "Holy shit, this movie is awesome! You're not gonna believe it. Oh, it's amazing." No specific spoilers, but they're talking about how great it is. I sat through this movie watching it thinking, okay, there's something crazy that's going to happen. I consider myself fairly smart. Watching it, trying to figure out what's going to happen, and it just went in directions I never even expected. I think that when it boils down to when John says, not only despite the political connotations and stuff that are going on in this movie, that the fact that it's a good movie, it just goes places that you don't expect, and it's really impressive.
Yeah, I do suppose the only thing I will say about this is I do wonder how it holds up on a rewatch, because so much of it hinges on the tension of not knowing like certain character motivations. I mean, that can be certainly said of a lot of movies.
That's a really good point. I'm kind of curious to go back and rewatch here soon just to see if I still like it as much.
And I think that also, even though like I didn't vote for it for my number one, I think like this is the movie that should be number one this year. Like,
Because you were basically being a troll. It's just like
it was a personal pick, John.
I don't want to use the word racist,
Yeah.
but
Oh my god.
Hey,
That's a good.
I'll stand behind Eric. He was supporting back shaving.
Yeah,
No, it's fair.
blood
no,
magic.
the thing I wanted to call a special attention to, Allison Williams earns literally like undying respect
Yeah.
for stepping into a role where she basically is one of the most monstrous humans that you can. I mean, literally. I mean,
Yeah, no,
just,
you're right.
Just evil, like pure evil, and she's fabulous in the movie. I mean, everybody's
Yeah.
really good.
That's what's interesting. Like, you know,
Just like
she
you,
also
Schnars, to
plays a
praise the white
complete
girl in
piece
the
of
movie.
shit on girls too. So it's like,
Yeah.
you know,
Oh.
is like,
I
is
mean, to
Peter
be- to-
Pan on TV her most redemptive part? Like, I don't know that she's ever been in anything.
To be
and-
fair, Mark,
and,
as
like,
someone who's actually watched a lot of girls, every character on that show is a complete piece of shit. So
well, right, sure, but I'm saying like Allison Williams specifically just kind of leans into. She has that like, just like basic every white girl quality about her that she knows that it's there, and she just leans right into it.
She leaned into it really hard.
also, I
Having
thought
never
Special
seen
shout
an
out to Caleb Landry Jones, Joe's favorite.
Joe's
actor
favorite
of all
actor.
time.
Oh my god, it's so good.
Yeah.
the
I
redheaded,
just-
the redheaded kid with the lips.
The
It's so
brother.
The
funny.
redheaded mouth
Fuck that
breather.
guy.
Because Joe sees something has like a viscerally negative reaction. I have a viscerally positive reaction because I just think about how much Joe hates him, and it makes me
I
laugh
was
every time.
literally like,
see
I was
it.
trying to figure out. I don't know why. Oh, because I think I originally thought he was in that movie, and we'll talk about it later, Lords of Chaos. And I was trying to figure out what this asshole's name was, and I could not find it today. Now, thank you. What movie did we see him in where he like ate
We've
people's
seen
flesh?
antiviral.
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 Antiviral. That's what it is.
Schnars.
Yes.
Schnars.
So yeah, I
Little
mean,
bottle of
the only
Mountain
thing to say
Dew.
about Get Out, in my opinion, is that my only concern for it is that our hopes are now so high for Jordan Peele.
Yeah.
And again, like
Yeah.
he's done a lot of awesome shit in his career. Like you,
He
you
seems
can
like a
watch
dude
the
that has ideas. I'm not worried about Jordan Peele.
Well, so he's got a bunch of shit coming, right? So he's now involved in either a Netflix or some type of like serialized horror thing.
Yeah, like a Twilight Zone remake.
I'm just saying, the dude that
something or
came
other.
up with that Gremlins 2 sketch is probably the most brilliant writer of all time. So
Let's see if we can turn that into a movie. Actually,
it's in the movie.
It's in the movie. Lipstick boobies, bitch.
Lipstick, boobies, bitch.
Yeah.
Child.
So
you have the mind of a
that's-
child.
It's I like literally my expectations are I just want whatever he does next to be. It doesn't have to be as political or poignant or whatever. It just needs to be good.
You'd
So
like
Yeah.
that, would you?
That it probably shouldn't, right? Like I feel like you could just make like a really fun monster movie, cool it off a little bit, and
Mm-mm,
you know.
mm-mm.
Gremlins
Well,
is
that's,
No.
great.
that's the beauty of it, though, because after watching Get Out, we can expect a good movie, period, despite whatever kind of message or anything that he's trying to put forth there
Well,
with it, whatever his next movie is, because
Say go sequel, get outer.
Get more out.
I heard someone say Gremlins 3, and now I refuse to live in a reality where Jordan Peele is not directing Gremlins 3.
that was
All
awesome.
right.
Christ. So it was a good list. All right, let me run it down really quick because I know Joe's getting a little antsy.
I'm
slash
fine. I feel good.
All right, so I mentioned at the top of the show, I did the most similars. So this is your BGH soulmate. What's interesting is that everyone's soulmate, I only did it for people obviously on the podcast, but all of ours ended up being someone else who's on the podcast. And I think that has to do with a lot
makes
of like
sense,
we
yeah.
have these conversations together. Our tastes tend to blend together a little bit more than
This is
the rest
adorable.
of it.
We walk
So
alike. We talk
we're-
alike. Sometimes we even think alike.
we're
It
just
could
gonna
drive you insane.
we're gonna run it down. Joe, your soulmate is Mark.
Oh,
Aw.
I thought you were
I
gonna-
didn't need
How
a top 10
cute.
list to tell me that, Joe.
That-
I thought you were
Hold
gonna
on,
say
that's-
me because
that
Joe
is
copied
not
my
to
list.
say that Mark's is Joe though. This is what so
Oh.
like Joe.
Ooh,
Yes.
mystery.
This is where Eric, yours is Cece,
Ah, wow.
Aw.
and now
I have been reading a lot of books lately, John.
I know.
Yeah,
It's
that's what it
showing,
was.
apparently.
so Cece and I had each other.
Oh.
Mm.
But the most similar of all of anyone that I did the scores for was Casey and Mark.
Oh wow,
Oh,
Wow.
that makes
How about
sense.
that?
Very, very
Right.
similar lists.
That makes sense.
Impressive.
They're both
So
very
I got
huggable.
nobody? That's what we're saying.
Mark, this is your future.
You got me on one end. I got you both. I can stand in between you guys. You can give me just a big, massive bear hug. Sandwich me.
Literally getting emails about my 20-year high school reunion, and now this shit is coming back to haunt me again. Fuck you guys, I'm out.
It's too much this week, Joe. Too much. John,
Yeah.
I think I speak for everyone when I say nice work.
Yeah, bravo.
Yes,
Thanks,
bravo.
man.
Yay.
Um,
It's a
You and I
delight.
you and I need to talk about this data. We need to get this somewhere. I am fascinated about these old lists.
super
I
impressive.
do think we have a couple of tweets probably to get to, and
We got a handful.
we definitely got to wrap things up. Was there anything else, John?
No, that's all we got.
All right. Well, let's take a quick break and then do some tweets.
Blood-curdling horror gets underway with Crazies, directed by none other than Mr. Horror himself, George A. Romero.
Could it happen?
Get me the president.
More important, could it happen here? Could a whole community be infected by violent madness? Brother against sister, lover against lover, the state against the people. You had better see The Crazies.
Hey, I'm Tommy Ricola, director of Dead Snow and Dead Snow 2, and you're listening to Bloody Good Horror.
Send your emails to info@bloodygoodhorror.com or hit us up on Twitter at BGHorror with the hashtag AskBGH. And don't forget to pick up back episodes of the show at podcast.bloodygoodhorror.com.
And we are back. Last minute email to the show, info@bloodygoodhorror.com. This is from our legal correspondent, Adam.
Oh boy.
I want to first say I'm a big fan of the Schnars character.
Yeah.
I also
Hey,
love
you.
I also love the word of the day. However, on the episode about super dark times, Schnars did not have an origin for the word manslaughter. After a cursory search, manslaughter's origin is the Old English manslate, Anglian, or manslite, West Saxon, which means the act of killing. The
All
etymology
right.
the etymology the etymology
Too
is
much.
the etymology is identical with homicide, but in legal use usually distinguished from murder and restricted to simple homicide, the unlawful killing of a person without malice or premeditation. I could go into it more, but who wants to hear more of my legalese? Just wanted to shame Schnars for not using Google properly. Love the podcast and listening to all of you every week. Happy New Year from lawyer Adam. There you go.
I want to
Adam,
hear more of Lawyer Adam's legalese.
I was gonna say, it's lovely to hear from you. That sounds like some LexisNexis nonsense, so I'm gonna call that. No, I do.
Wait, is
what I do is I
LexisNexis
type-
still a thing?
Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure. I don't know, maybe not. I type define colon and then the word, and whatever Google spits out, that's what I read. So if anyone's curious how the word of the day comes together, and that's usually
Define
about-
colon.
it's usually about 10 minutes before the show, as Joe has pointed out. at
10
several-
minutes. What? I think it's usually during like the intro music.
All right, Joe. Yeah.
Mark, please bring us tweets.
Eric, really quick, can I jump in?
Damn it, John.
Do
you were
it,
you
do
were
it.
ignoring me because I had one more stat I wanted to throw out. I always, for the last couple of years, I have I've nominated or recognized the person who had the list that came closest to the final list. So we now have our complete Bloody Good Horror, voted on by the crew list. And we can actually look at whose list was the closest of the group. So who is the sort of like most, similar to the average opinion. This year, that recognition goes to Evan.
Oh, wow.
Congrats.
Yeah,
Go
Way
ahead.
to go,
Evan.
Good
Evan.
job, Evan.
he was remarkably close. I
Huh.
mean, like closer than almost anyone has been in the last couple of years.
John, you might want to check out your bed. Maybe
Witchcraft.
he's. maybe he's
It's witchcraft.
Yeah, it is some witchcraft. No, he got number 1 and number 2. He had Happy Death Day pretty high. The thing that Evan had the furthest out, he had a little film called The Beguiled. Are you guys familiar with this? Sofia
Yep.
Coppola film.
No.
Yeah, it appears on a couple of top 10s.
Nope. Nope.
This
Yeah.
is ironic though, because I don't think Evan's been on the show at all this year.
He did not. He was not. He's been very busy with Joe and their.
All right. Friends of the Real
Yeah.
Housewives podcast.
He's a busy guy, but we miss him. He needs to come back sometime soon.
You know what the trouble is? He has a day job now, and the time difference in California makes things a little tough for him to be on.
How
Yeah.
dare he? How
Quit your job, Evan. Come on.
Yeah. I should mention Casey.
Take a day off to be on an episode of the
were number
podcast. It's
2.
very important.
I was number 2.
Casey was number 2 in the
story of
closest-
my life. I was number
There you
2.
So
It's the bridesmaid.
All right, Mark.
Yeah, I got it.
there you have it. I'm sorry, Eric. I'm sorry.
It's all right. I'm just tired. It's late. I'm drunk.
That's good. Sometimes you got to give Evan his due. All right. We use 2 hashtags, one of which is BGH Classic. So if you are listening to a past episode from Patreon, patreon.com/bloodygoodhorror, and you're listening to back episode, you hear something silly, tweet us with the hashtag BGH Classics and we'll read it. First one is from Jesslyn35. Between you squatting and Joe grinding his own meat, I don't know what to think anymore. Don't ever do those things in the same room. That was Eric from episode 287. I have no idea what that context is.
No, me neither.
Great.
It's been a while since I ground my own meat.
Yeah. Oh, that was, right in your kitchen. Right in your kitchen. So gross. Next one from Robale. Eric says, Joe choosing to show up after the beer gate where it was revealed he's repeated beer picks. Joe said, I'm the one who cracked that wide open. John said he was deep throat and Woodward, and Joe said just like college.
Joe.
Year ender 2016.
I would say
Oh, nice.
50% of my jokes end with just like college. So
So you're saying
that was
beer-
my nickname in college.
You're saying
Yeah,
Beergate
yeah.
was about a year ago.
that was the name of my band in college. So yeah.
I want to know more about Joe's college. All right. We also use the hashtag AskBGH. You have a question, ask it with the hashtag AskBGH, and we will hopefully read it. This one is from That Baseball Joe. How long did it take Schnars to prep for his role in I, Tanya, and will he be reviewing it for Sophistical?
I'll tell you what, Sebastian Stan looking schnarzier than ever in I, Tanya. It's not even like a debate anymore. It's unreal.
I haven't worn a mustache though in a while.
You need
so.
to, buddy. You need to.
Great. Next one from Robale. From Eric and Joe's constant digging at Schnars, I've developed an anger towards him. Is he really that bad, or have I just developed Stockholm Syndrome?
Oh my God, no. Like John and I think probably hang out more than anybody else on the show.
I also think
famous
that
for
we give John the most shit because he has the thickest skin and also doesn't really care, and we really
Yeah.
just.
I was gonna
Really
say
just
my
give it to
skin
him.
is not that thick. I care the least.
Yeah,
think.
John cries himself to sleep.
I
after every
legitimately love Schnars. If anyone's ever seen been around
this.
when I see Schnars for the first time in a long time, and you see the kind of hug that I give him, you know
It's a lot of
it's real.
Also,
touching.
I should point out that
Out
as
of
much as we
hands.
give him shit about it, everyone's like, oh, John's so snooty, blah, blah, blah. Whenever we go out or hang out, John is the one who's up until 4 a.m, just like, hey guys, let's hang out. Let's hang out. What are you doing? Let's hang out.
If I get the vibe
And,
that somebody, if
I
I
would
Sometimes
disagree
more
with that.
blacked out than
John
that.
is the one at like 11:30 that is blackout drunk.
Yeah.
Right.
also like Mark's right. If
He
I
means well, but he
Mar-
means well.
if I get the vibe that like somebody can really take a good ball busting, I consider that a challenge. So I,
Eric just wraps himself all the way around John's balls and tries to bust them as
Bust them.
hard as possible.
Yeah, he does.
you know me, I like to bust.
Just like to bust.
All right, let's
Great.
move on from the
Yeah.
balls and the busting.
John's delightful. Don't hate him. If you hate John, stop listening. That's my opinion. Next one is from our very own Sophie, Philly's fan. Now that you rank all the best and worst movies, what's the best scare of 2017?
Oh, it's easy. CC's attacking door.
Yes.
I don't have a better
mean,
answer than that.
Whew, it is intense.
Door scare.
Still
Door-
gets me.
Yeah.
Door scare.
Door scare 2017.
Door scare. Wait, did you get New Jersey Knicks, Mark? He forgot to tag it, and then he did tag it.
I don't know. Joe, you can read it if you want.
Oh god, now I gotta find it.
Oh, I found it. Never mind.
There you go, buddy.
New Jersey Nick, with what new addition to a horror franchise disappointed you the most this year? Cult of Chucky, Alien Covenant, Friday the 13th Game, Leatherface, etc.
Resident Evil.
Oh,
Those
It was the
movies have
final
always
chapter, man.
those movies have
Final
always
rain
been at
fights.
least a little fun
Rain fight.
and like had
Also,
some redeeming qualities, but that one was just a terrible ending.
I was super bummed. by
Shout
Cult
out
of
to
Chucky.
Luke, my favorite top 10 review this year. He ranked Resident Evil, in his worst, and it was Resident Evil Final Chapter, and his entire review was, "You promise?"
No, Joe, you're right. Cult of Chucky was kind of a bummer too because of how
Cult of
good
Chucky was a big letdown. I
how
was
good
really
the last
excited
one was.
for that to come back, and it was a
I,
bummer.
I didn't mind it.
I enjoyed it.
It's not good.
Like,
I will. So, Alien
That's
Covenant.
why we're together, Mark.
You guys are like, I don't
I-
know, it was fine. I hugged it.
I did not have it on my list in either direction, but Alien Covenant was one of the films that was on a lot of top
Yeah.
and bottom lists.
I had it on my
Yeah.
top.
Yeah.
I always have a movie like once every year. I always have a movie that I kind of regret that I didn't put in my top 10, and I have one that I think it would have replaced. And I think Alien Covenant should have been replaced by Raw on my list.
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah, it was actually when I did my initial list, it was in there because I just didn't see that many movies, and then I went and I pounded through like 6 or 7 of these things that I hadn't seen, and that ended up moving it. So
Yeah.
All right, we have one. We have one very last tweet. Not a question, but I'm going to read it. It's from Mark72 Carroll. 3 years in a row, watching the year-ender live. Strangely comforting
Nice.
to us too. Cheap live ad time. Big Picture Burgers in Kathleen, Georgia. Eat a great burger while watching a bad movie.
There you go.
go.
I just liked his elevator pitch, man. I actually immediately looked up how close it was to me, and it's not super close. But you know, if I'm ever trekking through Kathleen, Georgia.
I was gonna say, how far is that from Atlanta?
Oh, good question. Probably not too far. It's actually pretty far north, so it's actually probably relatively close to Atlanta.
How far from Cartersville?
I don't know. Cece, what do you
riveting.
think? What do you
You're
think I
looking
did?
it
What
up.
do you think I looked
Too
up?
bad you don't have the internet.
how
I
far-
got literally
I don't.
directions from my house. And
Wait a
that was
second,
it.
wait a
It's like
second.
something we
Stand
could figure out
It
offline.
is. It is 112 miles from Atlanta to Kathleen.
Oh,
Okay.
Serious question. How far is it from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre house that Cece grew up in?
Probably a little further, about 2.5 hours.
Can Leatherface drive?
Yeah,
Unclear. I'm
like a
unclear.
big, nasty, rusty truck.
Or an ATV.
Yeah, he drives
you
in
know?
at least one of the films.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I
I don't know
actually,
if that's true.
I
You
watched
know,
Leatherface
Texas
last
Chainsaw
night.
Massacre 6, Leatherface drives. You don't remember that?
Too
I actually
fast,
watched
too
Leatherface last night, and I didn't want to put it John through. I didn't want to give John a panic attack this close to our year ender, because this would have made my worst. Leatherface actually would have made my worst film of the
I
year.
saw it
It
on-
was
I s-
shit.
I saw it on
It
some
was
people's
on.
worst.
It was on a couple worse lists, Casey. You were not alone for sure.
Yeah, it was just not good at all.
I think it was not well seen. Like it wasn't, or
That
you
too,
know,
but-
seen by a lot of people. But
Is that it, Mark? I'm so tired.
Yes.
It's so late right now, you guys. This has got to be the latest we went all year.
This
It's-
is ridiculous. I can't live like this.
Joe, it's only 9:30 over there. I don't know over here.
Oh, you
Yeah.
guys. 2017, the year that would not end, has now finally ended. That is our top 10, our bottom 3. Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we will see you in 2018.
Deuces.
See you.
Bye.
Okay, bye now.